And we are live.
The coup d'etat of boxing back Sunday morning, back on our normal schedule, just a little bit early today. But yeah, episode 40, Corruption in Boxing, back with my partner in crime, soon to be serving time for breaking Eddie Hearn's spine. Official scorecard. How are we doing?
Well, except for those problems with justice, very well, very well. I'm so glad that we are doing new pound for pound list after such a long time, and we have a lot to say.
Mm, it's a perfect time, not to sort of exacerbate the sort of almost charged environment that the YTBC has been recently with the Ring magazine revising their list and all of the post reactions from the various boxing camps, and we've seen almost an engulfed racially charged atmosphere involving certain demographics. But Official and myself, we mentioned a number of months ago that we were in the process of revising our list, so it's purely coincidental, but I think it's great timing, and we're not going to we're not going to add uranium U-235 to what is all of the problems and all of the the Twitter beefs and the kind of ridiculous reaction. On the one hand, we have like proactive racism from one community, and then we have the reactionary sort of counter racism from the other camps. And um no, we want to keep it, we want to keep it boxing, we want to keep it objective, we want to keep it as critically correct as we possibly can. We're boxing fans at the end of the day, but we want to substantiate any boxing arguments we have with reasonable logic, science, and video evidence, as we've accustomed to producing on our channel and our individual channels. So, and we've been doing a hell of a lot of work behind the scenes. Official's been doing tremendous videos. I've been a little bit away, been battling some illness, unfortunately, which has been protracted, but I've managed to regain a little bit of strength. So hence the apologies that I have not been on recently, but it was mainly down to taking some time off and illness and recovering. So, but I'm back, revitalized, and yeah, ready to drop this revised list. But one also Official, talking about our original top 10 list, I think it stood the test of time with a lot of the individuals and the pugilists on our list proving their worth over the last 2 years.
Yes, absolutely. And look at that list. It was the list that we did on the 19th of January 21. We had Estrada number 10, Bridis 9, 8 Beterbiev, 7 Golovkin, 6 Taylor, probably the only one that went downhill since that list. 5 Chocolatito Gonzalez, 4 Ioka, 3 Usyk, 2 Loma, 1 Inoue. So it was more than a year ago, our old list. And 9 out of those, or rather 8 out of those 10 guys, showed up to be well deservingly holding those places. But a lot of fights happened since then. A lot of things changed, and plus we kinda tweaked just a bit since then. What we are looking for in pound for pound fighter. So this list is going to be different, and to some of you surprising, very surprising.
Absolutely. And to just to emphasize that the criterion which the coup d'etat of boxing implements is fighters who not only exemplify skills, so there is a degree of eye test, but skills in isolation cannot be the sole attribute which makes up the pound for pound list. Because if that was the case, there'd be so many tremendous fighters like Tony Harrison, Jose Benavidez, who've had like fantastic skills, but their performances do not warrant it. So achievements very much is a component, because derivatives is obviously skills are obviously a derivative of achievements. You cannot achieve in boxing, but achievements is a loaded component that scales up. So the greater the achievements, we're talking about fighters who not only beat their peers in dominant fashion. How did they achieve victory? Fighters who can move up multiple weights is a greater achievement. Fighters who move up multiple weights or even one weight, but defeat champions in their prime is a better escalation of achievements. Fighters who move up 2-3 weights well above their comfort zone, and that's the key here, is top tier. So you can clearly see an incremental rise in what we constitute as achievements, and that coupled with a skill set, a world-class skill set that separates them from all of their adversaries, that pretty much makes up our top 10. And remember, the coup d'etat of boxing, we don't conform to the corruption and decision making that we see on a weekly basis involving blatant robberies. We don't conform to that. We score fights correctly using film analysis, punch stats, obviously sharing and debating with our peers who may be like-minded in using rational science to score fights correctly, with the evidence put on our channels and Odyssey. That's how we do it. We don't conform to the robbery, so hence our fights are not based on the actual official scorecards that are, no pun intended, that are on BoxRec. They are based on our post-fight analysis, as well as other channels that we may mention who also conform to our conclusions in the scoring. So our pound for pound list, I believe, is correct based on sort of proper scientific evidence, as well as objective, no fanboyism. We don't have no individual stakes or like-minded nationality. We're hailing from Serbia and sort of South Africa, so we don't have no fighters in the top 10 from those respective countries. So there's no nationalistic fanboyism going here. Otherwise, Hecky Butler would be number 1 on my list. But
and speaking of South Africa, the last night, Nonshinga had a fantastic fight and won a belt. So congrats, corruption, to you and all of the other South Africans. You have a champion.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the fight I have to go back to see. But yeah, you can talk a little bit about. We'll talk a little bit about sort of upcoming or fights that may have happened recently. We get a little bit of time at the end, but let's get cracking official. Let's get into our September 2022. I guess our second coup d'etat of boxing. Chapter 2 in our pound for pound top 10 list.
Corruption, may I just say something, add something quickly? Yeah, so while you were talking, I was thinking to myself, Well, if Ring Magazine's new top 10 provoked so much anger from Haney and his fans, etc., I'm wondering if any of these boxers are going to listen to our show today. How many of them are going to get angry, smash their screens? But we are not big enough to get called out by them. But man, uh, everybody's going to see how our list, uh, despite us not trying to be boxing hipsters, but just how different it is from any mainstream publication. So please go on. And by the way, big up to everybody in the chat. Uh, I don't want to read your names now. We'll chat a bit later, but go on, Corruption.
All right, to kick things off with number 10. Now, number 10 proved to be probably the most difficult spot for Official and myself to sort of conciliate a number of candidates. We were switching around, and it took up until the 24th hour of a lot of intensive watching, 12 fights within the last sort of 24 hours to get down to one person. But we felt number 10, we want to incorporate freshness of youth with experience, but based on pound for pound level of skills, although the achievements may not yet suit it. But we think Virgil Ortiz at number 10 is a refreshing choice. There's no doubt about it. Virgil Ortiz is still very young, from the United States, from Mexican lineal descendancy, has had a little bit of a checkered last sort of 24 months, but it's more due to combination of personal sort of injuries, as well as a little bit of instability with a new trainer, etc., moving from camp to camp. And I think that lack of stability may have factored into recent performances, but on the balance, Virgil Ortiz has a pound for pound level skill set, and he's demonstrated that in the ring. Many boxing channels, I think, make a misconception in typecasting him as just a brawler, a come forward sort of pressure fighter, but he's not that at all. He has versatility. I think he looks at his opponents, the type of style they bring, and he'll implement a style that I think is effective for that opponent. He can play a counter puncher. We see that at times with Orozco, and we see he can be a pressure fighter to try and minimize distance against taller fighters who have longer reach, who can perhaps hit him with wide hooks like a Maurice Hooker. So he will just put down a high guard, come forward, target head and body to negate potential facial damage in which they can inflict with their sort of whipping punches. And with Michael McKinson recently, interesting with McKinson how boxing fans switch their opinions. A lot of criticism with McKinson coming into the fight, just based on box rec, given that he didn't appear to be heavy-handed with just 2 knockouts. But McKinson was a very good fighter, almost considered to be the best in the United Kingdom, having beaten Chris Congo, who was considered the boogeyman coming into the fight. And that was a surprising victory for a lot back in the UK. So McKinson was a very different sort of elusive type of boxer, but never ran around the ring. He's a fighter who would be happy to stand in the middle of the ring, try and slip shots and counter. Could fight. May not have had the best sort of international level of experience, but you have to give credit to him. Was willing to come to the United States and fight Ortiz, and it took Ortiz a little bit of time. Maybe he didn't quite implement the strategy with his new trainer Manny Robles, but that takes time. When you're moving from from Robert Garcia Eddie Reynoso to Manny Robles. It's not the best preparation coming in. So I think Virgil Ortiz, I think his performances will scale up given the amount of time he has with a fantastic trainer like Manny. Stability, put him in the ring 2-3 times. I think he can be ready for a title shot. But he's willing to fight. He's willing to take up any level of opponent pretty much straight away. I don't think he fears anybody. I think he's happy to remain at 147. He's already called out Terence Crawford. Many think he'll lose just on the basis of his last performances, but I think he'll be much better prepared for that fight. And it's interesting, official, with the Egidius Kavaliauskas fight. A lot of people, certainly a lot of the Virgil detractors, and a lot of the Virgil detractors are generally the Terence Crawford fans, so they'll make that like comparison in how Crawford dealt with Kavaliauskas and how Virgil dealt with him. But credit to Thunderdome, who's done hours and hours of film analysis on Virgil and Egidius, and very recently he's put up some footage and he's done various streams and going back. Now we picked it up straight away, but going back and looking at the Kavaliauskas and the Virgil fight, so Virgil's punch resistance may not have just been attributed to Egidius, but it was more down to certain elbows, certain premeditated elbows that Kavaliauskas landed, which discombobulated Virgil too. In particular, Virgil coming in after the first one, Virgil came in to try and clinch, as you rightly would do when you're hurt and the referee hasn't spotted it, to try and separate or even lay down a warning for Egidius. And then within the clinch, Egidius lands another one, a much harder one, which really rocks Virgil, and then the following punches may have dropped him. So not legitimate knockdowns, but you got to give credit to Virgil. He rose, he absorbed them, he recovered, and he stopped Egidius the same round. So he's got heart, he's got determination. He can absorb them, recover very quickly, and he can lay down the fury in retaliation. So, and that's a great quality for us as well in going forward, because he's going to have adversity against some of the bigger, heavy-handed welterweights, whether it's a Boots Ennis or whether it's an Errol or a Bud Crawford, etc. So I think he's got a lot of upside. I think he's got a hell of a lot of ability. I think he fights differently in every type of fight. He's knocking out people impressively, guys who've never been stopped before. So I think he meets all of the attributes to be on the pound for pound list.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And let me preface it with this. So up till the very last moment, just before the beginning of the show, we had originally, on my insistence, without trying to devolve too much, because we are going to get later into honorable mentions, but the number 10 was supposed to be shared, in fact, by Ben Rodriguez's brother, Joshua Franco, and the one and only Demolition Man, Sabriel Matias. It was my intention to put them two on the number 10, but being that I haven't studied none of those three fighters as much as you have, especially recently, you urged to replace them with Ortiz. And if I trust in anyone's how do you call it,
Judgment,
yeah, it would be yours, especially since like I said, I haven't examined them close enough so yeah, definitely. And it's easy to see that Virgil Ortiz has the skills. Now, like with almost every other fighter that we have on the list, I can give the counter arguments against them. One for Ortiz would be that he's maybe on the bigger side of 147, but his age, skills are definitely pound for pound worthy, and he can go just up and up. And that's what I'm expecting to see from him. Except if some tragedy happens. As long as it does not happen, Virgil Ortiz is on a good way to stay in pound for pound rankings for years to come. Yeah, and I will say he's well rounded. Now, yeah, you just perfectly explained the problems in his last fight. Also, I would say that maybe his punches, should be hidden and set up a bit better, but talent is there, and physical talent as well. The aggressiveness. I mean, the way he started the fight and fought throughout the entire fight against Maurice Hooker, who back at the time I appreciated a lot as a fighter and was even bigger than Ortiz. So Ortiz showed us that he has no problems being aggressive and fighting even bigger fighters than himself if we consider him on the bigger side of 147. So and that aggressiveness, the way he fought that fight, reminded me of another tall and lanky fighter who was one of the pound for pound best in the 90s, Puerto Rican Tito Trinidad.
Yeah, and official with the possible sort of implications you're mentioning, that is, I wouldn't say blatantly weight bullying, but what you got to realize is, remember, he started off 140. Now he didn't remain at 140, albeit like Terence Crawford, going down to 135 when you're a 160-pound athlete, even as he was back then, almost 5'9", 5'10". I mean, that was weight bullying. But Virgil very quickly moved to 147, so he didn't try and win any titles and beat up any significant opponents out there. So that to me indicated that he was trying to look for, the correct weight for him. Maybe a couple of minor issues here and there, being a little bit heavy, but he says he's comfortable at 147. He's doing drug testing. He says he can remain there. So I don't have an issue with that. Yeah, he's around sort of 5'10", 5'11", definitely. But he's not, you can see, you can look at his arms and his torso, etc., his upper body. He's not hugely muscular, so I think he can remain there, but it depends on the situation, because the belts are being held up in negotiations, and we've already seen that the sanctioning bodies are sympathetic to both Errol Spence and Bud Crawford. They're not, Errol Spence is almost the new Adonis Stevenson. Is he ever going to get a mandatory? And it's crazy, and I mean, the world wants to see Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev. That's the biggest fight in boxing, but for whatever reason, and we know it's down to Russia, they're giving them ridiculous mandatories, whereas Errol Spence and Bud Crawford, they can negotiate longer than a Manny Pacquiao and a Floyd Mayweather, and it's just ridiculous. So Virgil is stuck in a holding pattern at the moment, where he's going to get a fight if the negotiations break down. So I don't want to see that, because that's wasting his career a little bit. But as long as he keeps busy, I'm okay with him remaining at 147.
Yeah, well said. I mean, just like you said, he's on the slender side, but anyways, once again, he's very well rounded. He can do more than few things, and that was maybe even his problem, that he's trying to show everything instead of concentrating on developing one particular style. But anyways, definitely pound for pound worthy top 10 Virgil Ortiz.
All right, we'll rotate it. You take number 9.
Sorry, can you repeat?
I said we'll rotate the deliveries. So you take 9, I'll take
Oh,
8, you take 7.
oh yeah, with pleasure. Okay, so number 9. This is a guy who didn't really have a huge fight yet. And so you can say that our choice to put him on number 9 of our list is more based on how do you say, on the eye test than his achievements that are yet to come. But anyways, those skills that we are all seeing in the ring are top-notch, fantastic. It's this guy on the screen, Janibek Alimkhanuly. And from the start, from the get-go, I have to say to give a shout out to Precise because a fight film, aka fight film, because he's the only one who just recently mentioned him as someone having top-notch skills, and it is indeed the case. I mean, his footwork, his accuracy, his timing, precision, the way he sets up punches, top notch. And Bubu Andrade, well, he just ducked him. There is no need to sugarcoat it. So blatantly ducked Alimkhanuly because he's too big of a threat. While Demetrius chases a big money fighter to retire. But yeah, I can say a lot about that. But anyways, Alimkhanuly is to be watched and followed by every boxing fan. And I think that in the following years, he is going to prove his worth. And just like with other fighters that we've been mentioning constantly on this show and even on our separate channels years before, I think we are constantly proving that we can, spot talent. I mean, we've been talking about Bam Rodriguez for years before anyone else, just like with Joshua Franco, his brother. This is the same thing that is happening with Alimkhanuly. Yeah, he doesn't have achievements, but skill-wise, you can say it's a bit of a gamble, but we estimate that he can be a terror in and around his weight classes. And well, the future is going to prove us right or wrong, but I think that our track record is very good, and well, yeah, simply Janibek Alimkhanuly, another Kazakhstan fighter that we included on our list because we had Golovkin the last year. He's been pound for pound great fighter and very underrated skill-wise for years, while we rated him highly. We'll see what Janibek Alimkhanuly is going to do, but I'm expecting a lot of great things for him to come.
Yeah, 29-year-old Kazakh fighter who still only very, very sort of immature in his professional career. 12 fights, 8 knockouts. But when you look at the parallel universe of fighters from Kazakhstan, Russia, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, compared to, say, the United States, now Boots Ennis is touted as one of the most highly rated prospects in boxing. He's almost 30 fights in. And Janibek Alimkhanuly already has a world championship, is willing to fight unifications. And if this was a pound-for-pound Twitter battle, Alimkhanuly would be number 1 because, my God, does he talk some shit on his Twitter. Talking about disabling and paralyzing potential opponents. He's calling everybody out. And that's the new way in which fights which fighter beef is instigated and fights are made. That's unfortunately that's the evolution of technology and society and fighter mentality now. That's the way it's done, and we know that the Jamal Charlos and all of them that he's been calling out are all have all been have all received the tweets and retweets. I mean, I don't have a Twitter account, so I might be a little bit ignorant to how the composition of Twitter, how it all works. But no one except maybe a Falcao has had the audacity to sort of reply and challenge him to a fight. But anyway, enough of that. But as a fighter, very good amateur grinding, and hence that's what we always talk about, that these fighters, they have sharpened, that they've developed their craft through protracted amateur careers, as opposed to a lot of these fighters, like the Devin Haney's, etc., turning professional very, very young, which I don't agree with at all. All right, they may have been, champions by good fortune and sort of protection from television companies and promoters who put a lot of money into them to suit a certain market. But a lot of the other fighters are able to, they're ready for title shots at a very, very early age. And therefore they don't need a lot of tune-up fights, and that's refreshing, but it tends to warrant criticism, especially with a Lomachenko, people thinking that he's been given priority, he should have never received a title shot in his second fight, etc. They think it's never happened before, but if you actually look at your history, the Olympic champion Pete Rademacher, who won the Summer Olympics at heavyweight, he received a world championship fight against world champion Floyd Patterson in his first professional fight. So it's not precedented. Vasily had to fight a sort of a residual sort of WBO belt first of all to gain, the ranking points to get a title shot with Orlando Salida. So it wasn't the same as Pete Rademacher, who got a shot straight away. So it's not unprecedented at all. It's happened before, and that's a good thing, I think. If you're ready, if you've got the ability, you've shown that you're an Olympic champion. So what do you mean? Why waste 10, 15 fights if you can get good level of opposition straight away? I'm all for that. We're getting frustrated with fighters like Boots Ennis who are just beaten up on little guys at 140 pounds. And that's not what we want to see. We want to see him in big money, in big fights with champions. So Janabek, he's there. He's calling out. He's beaten, the Rob Brand, the former world champion, destroyed him with Bud Crawford's trainer, made him retire, beaten. He's been on a vicious knockout streak. I think the last person who may have survived his onslaught was 2019, Christian Olinas. But Janabek, an explosive counterpuncher, one of the masters of sort of lower body feints, likes to maintain that distance and range and just explode. A lot of these fighters are not really interpreting his feints he's throwing, and he's just that ability to sort of load up with massive punches, catch them sort of off balance, trying to jab and just come over the jab with just vicious left hands, hooks, left hands. I like the way he varies that left hand to the body, straight to the solar plexus, sometimes coming round when fighters are protecting their lower body, knowing that he's just peppered them initially with a right hook to the body, but then he'll come round. Nice, really, really and the speed official that he varies with his left hand, certainly head and body. Sometimes the body shots you'll notice are a lot faster to his head shots. So definitely like what I see thus far. High level of skills, heavy-handed, exciting, explosive, willing to fight anybody at any time. And I think he has the potential to be even the undisputed champion at 160 pounds. But we'll see what happens with Golovkin. Not sure whether Golovkin and him are going to fight two Kazakh fighters. I think there's a high level of mutual respect between both of them. But when a lot of money is down on the line, I'm not sure what happens to nationalistic sort of loyalty, etc. But in any case, I think Golovkin is at 168 now. I don't know whether he'll come back down to 160, may even vacate the belts, win or lose, upcoming. So I'm not sure whether Janibek will be in a position to fight the belts, but we've already seen that there seems to be an exodus of fighters who don't want to fight him with Andrade. Jamal Charlo, is he going to fight him? According to what's been happening on Twitter, I don't see any response from him. Jamal is very happy calling out fighters on Twitter, but when somebody calls him out, he's not. He's almost shy as a church mouse. So it could be another equally frustrating period as well for Janibek. So, but that's not his fault. He's laying down the challenges. If people want to defecate in their pants and just sort of get the fuck out of the division, that makes him number one for me at 160 then. But yeah. So Janibek comes in at number 9, WBO 160-pound champion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the only thing in between him and Golovkin, yeah, just like you said, there is a huge mutual respect. And I overheard from someone saying that he was once asked if he would fight Golovkin. He said that something along those lines that you just said, that there is huge mutual respect in between them. And anyways, Golovkin is at least currently at another division. Yeah, but cannot wait to see more of him, proving the talents that we know he has. That's why he's our pound for pound number 9.
Can you take the full? I've just got to slip out for a couple of minutes. Just got to.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. Yeah, which brings us to number 8, and let's see who's there. Just give me a second to share the screen. Hold on. Yes. Oh, sorry. This was a funny technical mistake. But yeah. Number 8, Gennadievich Golovkin. So yeah, he turned 40 this year, or the last. Well, it was around the day that he fought in Japan, and so yeah, he's still there. Maybe to the surprise of some of you, but we do estimate, especially with not only his skills that are still there, that he proved in his last fight, but also the adversity that corruption in boxing mentioned earlier on the stream, the adversity of fighting abroad in his opponent's backyard, which is something that is not very known to the most of the Western fighters that are being promoted by boxing mainstream media. But he's proving his worth for years. Now, the only counter argument I have is that I'm seeing that he definitely got a bit slower in comparison to his fights just a few years ago, and that especially foot movement that slowdown was seen in his last fight. But on the other hand, technically, the way he was setting up punches, etc. I mean, we've been talking on our podcast as well on other people's streams, Corruption and myself, about Golovkin's skills, very underrated skills. We did multiple film studies of Gennady Golovkin, and we do truly believe that, at least for now, his skill set is top notch. Now, many boxing fans are confusing the flashiness for skills, and being that Gennady always lacked the flashiness, they were confusing him for some brawler without no defense, which cannot be further from the truth. Uh, Gennady was showing that he doesn't show the same respect to all of his opponents when it comes to their punching power. So, but his defense was really good, even in his last fight, because look, his opponent was not a soft-handed fighter. On the contrary, and he was even bigger than Golovkin. You wanted to chime in, Corruption?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, man. Murata we've seen it before. He's a ferocious animal. Back in Japan, he actually grosses the highest television ratings from all of the Japanese fighters. We're talking, up to over 40 million view his fights. So he's a massive star back home. And it was a difficult challenge for a fighter who has one of the greatest skill sets I've ever seen as an all-rounded fighter. But the ability to still win fights against tough opposition, given all of the physical degradation, and we see the degradation specifically in Golovkin's legs. His legs are actually very heavy now, and that is natural. That happens to athletes going above sort of 35. But his boxing, his IQ, his chin, and his punching power are still able to carry him through these fights. And now he's a unified champion. He should have never have lost these world championships. He really should be number one, should be undisputed, lineal at 160. He's also a world record holder in terms of title defenses. There should have never been a break in between because he never lost any fight to Canelo Alvarez. That was just a ridiculous decision. He won that fight clearly 8 rounds to 4. Our forthcoming punch stats, slow down. We'll just elucidate that. We'll put that out just before the forthcoming third fight. And we're seeing what the fear in Alvarez, who's supposed to be the best. Number one, he extricates himself from the zone because he doesn't want the fight immediately as per the condition of the original contract. And then he procrastinates then he jumps up weight divisions. So he's waited at Golovkin even longer than the original period. It is ridiculous what has been going on. But Golovkin's is still gets so much of vociferous, criticism. I mean, how would you feel? Wouldn't you want to avenge your losses if you've been subjugated to this much? You take away the man's championships. All of the prestigious, accolades, and even the astronomical, sums of money that Golovkin could have even made going after. He could have gone up to 168 as the undisputed. He would have had a great sort of he would have had a perfect scenario. So Canelo has just pretty much stolen everything from Golovkin. So, but Golovkin, he's been undefeated with Jonathan Banks since. He's brought in some new skills, even at a latter age. So he's not just relying on everything he learned before. Um, so he's willing. I like that. The willingness to try and you know to be to sort of acclimate with a new trainer, see what Jonathan Banks has, trying to get a little bit of speed and variation in these punches. Get a little bit of hand speed, maybe not sitting down as much. Although in the Murata fight, he wasn't. I think he wasn't setting up his punches the best, but I think what happened is that he got very pissed off with Murata hitting him on the break, and I see the red mist come down with Golovkin, and I think he really wanted to put a beating down on him. I think that some of the illegal tactics that Murata was doing, I think it really sort of infuriated him, and you don't blame the guy, man. That's what you want to see. And boy, oh boy, did he put a beating down on him, finishing off with a superb sort of, right hand counter when Murata was sort of running in, kind of the momentum sort of escalated, the ferocity of the blow as well. But yeah, I thought it was a fantastic fight and it was a real fight against a fighter who may have been gambling on the first 6 rounds, probably realized he may not have had the stamina for the full 12 and was looking to get out Golovkin and was doing very well. So Golovkin had to come back from some adversity and show that he's still got, all of the sort of the fighting ability and the determination to sort of carry on and sort of get through the fight. So you have to tip your hat off to him. And now he has his opportunity to finally settle the score with Alvarez. Do a trifecta, a 3-0. Make a statement at 168 pounds at a new weight for him, and he's looking pretty good. And I think the power could carry up as well. And I'm fully expecting a very competitive fight, and I absolutely would not be surprised if Golovkin got the decision in this fight.
Yeah, that's something interesting. But wait, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, but it's really possible, being that even Golovkin is owner of a rather small percentage of shares of the zone, but yeah, he has a bigger piece of pie in the game from that standpoint. But I have to just add a few things. Yeah, it sucks that this trilogy with Canelo, it took Canelo first Gennady to turn 35 to fight him for the first time, then 36 for the second time, then 40 for the third time. But on the other hand, what's interesting with Golovkin is, and that's something that I already mentioned multiple times in the past, that this friendship and working together with Jonathan Banks seemed to me as a long-time plan, with Canelo being the main target. I think that was one of the main, if not the very main reason for him getting together with Jonathan Banks. And all these previous fights in between the rematch and this third fight that is about to take place, it looked to me like a big long-term training camp for Canelo trilogy, and it can be seen in the way Golovkin tweaked some things in his boxing. And yeah, we even talk, you and me, we both just mentioned Golovkin slowing down, especially his feet. But even, which is true, but even despite that, let's rewind back and see how the knockout against Murata happened, how he scored that knockout blow. It was with footwork, and the same thing that I was showing on my own solo channel. the way he was setting up Canelo. So circling to the left to make Murata pivot towards him and jab. And that way, Murata would give away the outside angle and he timed it with the overhand right. And another thing, look, first of all, that fight against Murata, yeah, Murata had a lot of aggressiveness in the beginning of that fight. And those were not easy first 3 or maybe 4 rounds. But even despite that, we both, you and me, I think, if I'm not wrong, scored it like we probably gave only 1 round to Murata. At least it was in my case. So
probably 2 rounds, I think.
Yeah, maybe I would not argue it, but that's the most I would have given him. And another interesting thing for all the critics that Golovkin is getting for that performance, they forget really 2 important things: that Murata was even way bigger than Golovkin himself, and he himself is a huge puncher. And the third thing is that he came out with a huge volume. In fact, you yourself, you told me that Murata said himself that he was preparing for a 6-round fight against Golovkin, being that he was out of ring for a long time, just like
Yes.
Golovkin, even more so. So he came out blasting. And in fact, if you take it into consideration how aggressive and what a high work rate Murata was showing against Golovkin, you just go to Golovkin's credit, because the same people who criticize him, they forget that glass-chinned Kirkland back in the day, with his power and volume, put Canelo, for example, in a much bigger trouble. And he was hurting Canelo bad. So this old Golovkin experience, and the 40-year-old Golovkin, even despite being old, he was never. I mean, yeah, he was feeling Murata's illegal punches below the belt, rabbit punches, body punches. In that sense, he was getting hurt, but not like shook like Canelo at all. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Murata, got to remember, he's also an Olympic gold medalist, so he has that pedigree we talked about in coming into the professional ranks. So yes, he suffered some difficulty with Rob Brand. He's not the best. He's not a top tier fighter in the sense that his ability to cut off the ring against fighters who are moving around is not A class. He's more of a fighter he's a fighter, but he can box, and he was countering Golovkin as well. So he was showing different attributes that I haven't really seen before. He's a fighter despite his size, but he wants to get into sort of mid-range, can even work on the inside, and he's looking to target the body. Is an excellent body puncher. But some of his countering on Golovkin at that sort of short range was actually very impressive. Golovkin sort of acknowledging and taking sometimes steps back, regroup himself, and come in, start the attack at a different angle. Styles, I think Golovkin just had that style to neutralize somebody like that who may not be be executing the jab to actually set up his punches the best, but Golovkin can figure out these fighters very well. The same thing he did with Canelo in the second fight. An Alvarez is a shorter fighter who's looking to load up. Best thing Golovkin was doing was from range, maintaining range, jab, forcing Canelo to turn, taking advantage of his cement, cinder block body and legs. Great strategy, and I think that strategy will work against Canelo in the third fight, especially with fighters like with Alvarez, whose volume, whose style of fighting is almost so different to what he was at 160 pounds. I mean, you've done this on a number of videos. not the same level of upper body movement, not utilizing. I think his jab, as you mentioned, was his best weapon in their second fight. But that jab has just almost disappeared at 175, even at 168. That Eddie Reynoso style of just throwing crazy wild hooks, just trying to almost beat, almost using like a battering ram type of hooks to cause more, damage rather than setting up, breaking down opponents. That sort of level of boxing, if he tries to replicate that sort of style with a Golovkin, I don't think it's going to work for two reasons. I think Golovkin will be smart enough not only to use his legs to try and stop Alvarez from getting into that mid range. If Alvarez can't duck and slip Golovkin's jabs to come in and land those bruising hooks, I think Golovkin will just turn him. So Canelo will have to continuously reset. Alvarez is going to have to use his jab to try and set up his heavy punches. And if he comes out jabbing, really using his jabbing and using his waist to get up and down, that's something he's not doing, then Golovkin will be in trouble. And if Canelo's been on heavily on the EPOs, then he might have. And Eddie Reynoso pulls out the smelling salts at various stages of the fights, then Canelo might just have that injection of stamina to really put Golovkin in trouble. But it's all down to what version of Canelo we're going to get. If it's the same as before, I'm not sure whether I'm not sure whether he has the ability to win the fight. Maybe on the cards, yeah. But if it's the Canelo who's actually humbled himself, has a little bit of fear of what Golovkin has done to him before, and there must be. And if he can turn back the clock and try, and maybe because he's coming down from 175 to 168, maybe he'll be a little bit better, maybe a little bit more dexterous, the inflections. So maybe he will be a little bit more sort of more of a boxer puncher as opposed to a puncher. A boxer puncher Canelo, he should be stopping Golovkin if he's the elite fighter that everybody's called him out to be. He should be knocking out this pensioner. So anything other than a knockout is considered as a failure official.
Yeah, that's very well put. I mean, if you're considered by the mainstream publications as the number one pound for pound, you should act accordingly and dispose of this 40 years old guy. But we'll see.
Anyway, yeah, pretty self-explanatory why Golovkin is in there. So we'll move over to number 7, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, number 7, we've got a new addition to the list. Somebody whose skill set we've been monitoring for a while, but I think Dmitry Bivol comes in at number 7. And that could be polarizing to a number of people as well, but I think it's different horses for different causes. I think Dmitry Bivol may not have had the best level of opposition, but to a certain degree is a bit of frustration. And the promotional situation really hasn't helped matters as well. I think the sanctioning bodies have been very, very hot and cold about unifications that Bivol has been trying to put forward, but Eddie Hearn has a separate agenda, and I mentioned that sort of. But Bivol has been putting in excellent performances. He's hardly even lost that many rounds. Now, he's fought against even fighters in the UK. Maybe he's been on. Maybe he's coasted to victory to a certain extent, but I think Bivol is the sort of fighter that fights to the level of his opponents, what sort of dangers they possess. But just a beautiful fighter in the ring, elegant, high level skill set, a fighter who is not over aggressive, but defensively, I think he's a very conscious. He won't try and rip high level combinations and potentially get countered. So he has that awareness, maintains his fundamentals at all times. Great footwork. So his defensive is not only great guard position, head movement, but also his feet to get out of danger. Can be a little bit heavy legged at times. I do admit, and certain other criticisms is that when he's very comfortably winning a fighter, does he have the gears to go into overdrive to really put forward the effort and try and get opponents at it? Something which you really should be doing. And I think that might be a valuable, criticism. I think he has the ability to do that. He certainly has the ability to sort of pace his attacks over 12 rounds, and he still looks fresh in the latter rounds. So no surprise when Canelo Alvarez came calling that Bivol put a comprehensive sort of outboxing on Alvarez. I think, to me, what was surprising that a lot of people felt that Alvarez would just sort of dominate and knock out Bivol, but never the case. And I think we mentioned it before that had there been independent and sort of fair decision making and a good referee to adjudicate the process, that Dimitri Bivol's skills would outbox Canelo. Certainly against the Canelo Alvarez, who at 175 pounds, who is just really looking to knock out opponents, not even jabbing. And I think Bivol did an excellent job in not biting on Canelo's feints. And as you mentioned, was landing punches even before Canelo would even initiate his own attacks after trying to feint, trying to throw decoys and trying to trick Bivol into opening up with his own punches, and then Canelo looking to land with sort of leaping left hooks. I think Bivol was very composed, read all of the body, read all of the signals, didn't fall victim to some of Canelo's, deception. So it shows a meticulous level of sort of ring IQ and, concentration. And yeah, it was very composed, clinical, put a beating on Canelo at times, and potentially could have even knocked him out. But I think Bivol almost did that Alexander Usyk in the first fight, and thinking that I don't want to ruin the potential chances of a rematch. Took the fight, and you got to give credit to him. He never haggled anything. I think he took a quite a ridiculous $2 million sum. He was just desperate to take the fight and finally show the world what he was capable of doing. So you've got to respect the humbleness of these fighters as well, knowing that if I beat a marquee fighter in Alvarez for whatever pitiful sum of money, that'll just elevate my profile, and therefore I'm able to negotiate fights at a much higher rate subsequently. So you make that sacrifice, in which he was willing to do. Didn't procrastinate or whatever, didn't haggle, try and renegotiate, took whatever terms. I guess he may not have been in the ideal position, although he was a belt holder, but it doesn't really matter to Alvarez when it comes. But yeah, Bivol has been desperate to fight Artur Beterbiev, in which would be an absolute mega fight. That is the biggest fight in boxing, no doubt about it. I think some of the best skill sets, a fight that we're desperate to see, but it's an absolute travesty. Bivol wanted that fight straight away, and he even mentioned it as well, that he wanted Beterbiev, and Beterbiev similarly wanted off Dimitri Bivol. An undisputed fight, whether it happens, it doesn't matter to those guys whether it happens in the United States, it happens in Canada or anywhere. These guys have basing their camps overseas. They'll fight anyone, anywhere. So, yeah, Bivol comes in, new addition to the list, and I think he's demonstrated that he's a top tier, top 10 pound for pound level fighter.
Oh yeah, definitely. By the way, sorry if you're hearing any background noises. There is some music festival not too far away from me. So, but anyways, when it comes to B-Wall, yeah, we even a year ago when we were doing our previous pound for pound top 10 list, we wanted to include him. He was one of the candidates for top 10, but the thing is, we were paying a bit more attention to the opponents, the achievements than the eye test, which is a little bit different this time. And when it comes to eye test, it was clear for years before that he always deserved to be on this pound for pound list. Skill wise, he's one of the sharpest fighters in boxing in the game. There's no doubt about it. His timing, his footwork, distance control, the way he just like you said, he's not looking to throw huge haymaker. He's looking to land as quick as possible, shortest punch possible without cocking back, etc. That's something that always give him the advantage over his opponents. And so extremely well schooled fighter in many ways. He's sharing the unfortunate he had this misfortune similar to Alexander Usyk of being being trolled by his own promoter, which is still in fact Eddie Hearn, being that he's a huge of a threat to the other guys of Eddie Hearn that probably have bigger money potential. So in his post-fight interview after the Canelo fight, he even had to say sorry to Eddie Hearn in his face for beating Canelo, which is so stupid. But yeah, and the thing is, we are not putting him, like I said, because he beat Canelo. Because Canelo, yeah, you can say he's a beast, and I would not argue if anyone would want probably to place him on the lower level on number 9 or 10 or their pound for pound. He's a very well-rounded fighter, but I never looked at Canelo as an excellent victory. Now, on the other hand, those same people who were praising Canelo for becoming the undisputed in 168, etc. So on his way to becoming undisputed, he fought a guy of a similar size, of if not the very same size as Bivol, Caleb Plant, and even before he fought Danny Jacobs a couple of years ago, an even bigger fighter. And excusing this loss against Bivol on size is just plain stupid to me, because first of all, Bivol is a fighter who never uses his strength. His boxing, he's 0% based around it. So it was pure skills and pure stylistic matchup that got Canelo Alvarez, I can freely say schooled by Bivol. And there are some other things that I wanted to say, but it escapes my mind. But I would say we said enough about Bivol. Are we going to the number 6?
Yeah, absolutely. Number 6, I think he was in our original list, but I think his level of performances are going from strength to strength, and the perfect embodiment of a fighting machine, and that is Artur Beterbiev from Russia. Currently, or since the last has further unified light heavyweight and now holds 3 championship belts alongside the Ring Magazine belt as well. A fantastic, just an absolutely fantastic fighter. Maybe the perfect fighting machine. Somebody I've followed for a very, very long time, and I don't think a lot of people know the history of Beterbiev. Even as an amateur, suffered a tremendous amount of discrimination within the sort of Bolsheviks, Russians, and the level of discrimination and prejudice towards Chechen fighters. If you really analyze his amateur career, despite winning the world championships, but suffered a hell of a lot of discrimination and bad decisions. I mean, I've gone through his career. He really hasn't suffered even a single defeat. Even with the 3 fights against Alexander Usyk, won the first fight. The second and the third he was adjudicated to have lost, but he dropped Usyk in both of those fights with liver hooks. And we know in amateur boxing you don't get any points for a knockdown. So Usyk was maybe fortunate to have survived. Although the second fight was very, very close, but that was probably his closest fight. But some of the other fighters against so-called Russian favorites in Atol and being forced to move up from light heavyweight to heavyweight because the Russian Sports Federation wanted Mikhail Protniak to take the spot, who was groomed to be the 175 dominant force in Russia. Beterbiev had no choice. They just literally kicked him up. Although he's not a heavyweight, he's actually, despite his sort of rock solid sort of physique, almost carved out of granite look, he's not actually that big of a man. But combination of natural genetics and the way they train in the Caucasus region, one of the most bombed places on the planet, alongside sort of Laos and Vietnam. These guys have just gone through hell under the bombings of Boris Yeltsin and Putin when he took over. Just decimated that place. So these guys, credit to them, whatever training regime they managed to muster, etc. They just produce fantastic fighters, both in boxing, UFC, whatever discipline they choose to enter. And Beterbiev has just been on a wrecking ball, 100% knockout. People thought Joe Smith would actually pose a threat to him, and just look at the way he disposed of him. Didn't even get out of first gear. Come over to the States, no problem for him. Fight in New York if he has to in Joe Smith's backyard. Smith trying to pressure him, trying to get him in the corner with his jab. People underestimate Beterbiev's defense. They think he has bad footwork. They think he just fights in straight lines, but his defense, not only against Alexander Vostik, which was fantastic, but against Joe Smith, his ability just to even move around on the back foot when Joe Smith is trying to use his jab to try to get almost navigate him into the corner, which you can just open up with his punches. But Beterbiev just being so smart, coy, laying Joe Smith in and just firing beautiful counters, on top of the jab, slipping the jab over, getting that lead hand over. And he doesn't even have to sit down on these punches for him to cause damage. It can be almost like a flash. It could almost be like an out punch. Not even the knuckles landing. It's just a tremendously heavy-handed fighter, and has everything really. Body work, body punches. Can be a pressure fighter, can be a counter puncher, can be a patient fighter. He's not accustomed to start fights too fast, and that's a credit to a lot of these boxers from the aforementioned regions. They can lose rounds, but you never see their stamina. And they may not have world-class stamina over 12 rounds, especially with Beterbiev being in his high 30s, but nor do they ship a lot of punishment, which will deplete. And we know they make a lot of these fighters make mistakes when they're agitated, and it tends to eat into their stamina as well. So they just have that ability to maintain calm, not utilize too much energy, knowing that their acumen and their superior boxing skill and technique will prevail eventually. And with Beterbiev, he doesn't really have to even break down his opponents, but he can do that, and we saw that. We've seen that in the past as well with a Marcus Brown, broke him down and lay a beating on him subsequently. So if a fighter is a little bit of elusive, not willing to engage, then Beterbiev can do that as well. You really got to knock him out, and you've got to knock him out early. I wouldn't say he has a weak chin. He's been caught off balance a little bit once or twice. Maybe Callum Johnson landed the best punch on him. Callum Johnson may be a domestic level fighter, but that has nothing to do with punching power. You may even have a club fighter, but he might be extremely heavy-handed. Maylander has a puncher's chance, may land the punch, but Beterbiev was able to recover and, inflict multiple knockdowns and take him out. So I don't think Beterbiev, as we mentioned before, official, is going to be able to move up. He's not going to be able to move up to heavyweight for the reasons I mentioned, that he already had to move up from light heavyweight to heavyweight as an amateur. He just doesn't have the size to go up. Cruiserweight may be a stretch as well. He's not that big of a guy. This is about ceteris paribus. This is about the right weight for him. So, and the 175 has been a very good division as well. So, I think a super fight with him and Dmitry Bivol, provided they get through their mandatories in Anthony Yarde, I think it happens next year, and Gilberto Ramirez, or whether Eddie Hearn is trying to gate crash the party with Joshua Buatsi. I think that's an agenda Eddie Hearn has been, to try and relieve Bivol of the belts. He clearly wants Buatsi as the champion, so politics may stop us and corruption may stop us from a potential super fight. But I think Beterbiev is just, for me, if there's one fighter, if they, as I mentioned, who I think would probably have beaten Usyk if they were at level weights very early on in the career, is Beterbiev for me. I just think him and Inoue are just almost like the perfect fighting machines in terms of destruction. I think he can be even a lot higher on the pound for pound rankings as well. I just think you can't argue with what he's done thus far. Just destroying everybody, not even going on points thus far. Beaten undefeated world champions, very good champions, multiple champions, and just putting a vicious beating on them as well. So, yeah, Dmitry Bivol, fully justified, I think. Sorry, Beterbiev, sorry.
Yeah, Beterbiev, definitely. So, okay, I'm not going to repeat all the things or any of the things that you just mentioned, because I agree with it. It was, in fact, very interesting what you said at the beginning of this part about Beterbiev, how he was, in fact, forced to move up to 200 pounds. Yeah, that's something that you told me a couple of days ago in a long 4-hour conversation that should have been a live stream, because it was so good, so informative.
It's crazy, official. I mean, like in one of his amateur fights, he got disqualified, and it was just almost like 2 warnings he received, and then disqualified. It's like for just almost single punches he landed. So one of them might have been low, warning. The second punch he lands, he gets disqualified. It's just punitive refereeing. They were just desperate, absolutely desperate to deny him, you know, deny him whatever it was. I think he was fighting for the final of the Russian state title. Is just crazier, man. You know, people I think should go back and have a look at these. You know, some of those, even some of those losses. I think they were utter madness, man. I couldn't really see a single legitimate loss.
Yeah, interesting. But so yeah, like I said, I'm not going to repeat what, or because you just put it perfectly. But what I'm going to add a few things. So that knockdown that he suffered against the British fella Callum Johnson, right? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
is his name. Yeah, so I think it was just well timed because Arthur was about to do something that he does all the time on the inside, as he throws a punch instead of bringing his glove back. He's is used to leave it in front of either opponent on his guard around his head, so he can smother his opponents, and if neither push them, pull them down, even dirty tactics behind the neck,
yeah,
etc. So
yeah,
that's what he was trying to do. He was reaching to bring his glove close to Callum Smith's guard or upper body, shoulder, neck, and that's how Callum Smith caught him. Yeah, speaking more of it, I mean, Beterbiev, he can do many different things. Like in his last fight against Smith, he was boxing perfectly. He showed how he's able to, and how his skill set is underrated, not flashy, yet more than sufficient and very high level. He's able to set traps, counter punches, and use the lateral movement, something that I already covered before that fight in one of my breakdowns. And he did the same thing to Smith, and that's the way how he destroyed Smith with those lateral movement and traps and right hands from the angles. Yet he's seen by many people, unfortunately, as a crude brawler. Now, yeah, there is a lot of physicality when it comes to his fighting. Um, just like you know what I said. I'm wondering if he would have stopped all of his opponents that he stopped if he was not using his physicality. And I'm not talking about his punching power, but mauling them, leaning over them, pulling them down. And that's unfortunately something that I do not really like. I mean, I hate it in boxing. So he would use those tactics that I don't like. Uh, so I'm just wondering. I'm tentative to believe that at least few of his opponents would have survived the fight or make it to the full 12 to the decision if they were not being twisted up like a pretzel by Arthur. But on the
yeah.
other hand, uh, he did great against Smith without using those tactics at all. So
But
doesn't
official,
mean that.
look at Marcus Brown. Marcus Brown tried to do to Beterbiev what he did to Badu Jack with his head,
Mhm.
busted it, laying premeditated. Let's face it, they were intentional headbutts multiple times. Busted up Beterbiev's face, so he was risking losing his championships on the basis of cuts. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
bleeding profusely. So Beterbiev had the urgency to say that, look, all right. Plus, he wanted to probably exact a little bit of revenge as well, man. Maybe lay down some hammer fists on him. You can't blame the guy. So yeah, you know, I mean, So what happens in boxing, you get the fight I was watching last night, which I'll talk about later when it comes to honorable mentions, but you see a lot of that. Can be, I don't think it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to say whether it's intentional or whether the way it's just been implemented within his style from a very early career. I didn't see a lot of that in his amateur fights, official. I didn't see a lot of dirty tactics for the reasons I mentioned, because of this potential disqualifications he would face, and referees would be given instructions there would be zero tolerance on him. They just wanted any excuse to disqualify him or give him a warning, whatever else, because they simply did not want Beterbiev winning the fight, especially if he was fighting another Russian. And a lot of his fights were in Russia, so I don't think so. Beterbiev always subconsciously, and even in the ring, he always had to fight clean, and he always had to win decisively for that reason. And I don't think that's carried forward. I don't think the art of being dirty is something deliberate or second nature to him professionally. It's just what goes on in the ring, the rules of engagement. Maybe he's retaliating to something he's, as you mentioned, like with a Marcus Brand, something that he's felt. Maybe he's felt a few low blows and he's retaliating. I don't know. Some fighters are like that.
Well, you know what? I'm not talking on the contrary that Marcus Brown fight. Well, I agree, because I totally agree with you about the fight, because he was being Marcus Brown. He was being extremely dirty. And Beterbiev, on the other hand, he's not fouling all the time, because it's simply a part of his style to implement the physicality and smother his opponents. And most of the times, I would say, even most of the times, he's on the edge of legal versus illegal, staying on the legal side, but just being so physical. And it's not his fault that he's extremely strong physically, pound for pound, probably the strongest fighter in boxing. But I was mostly thinking about the fouling he did against Alexander Gvozdik, for example. That one I really hated. But yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, nothing more. I mean, nothing more. I mean, he doesn't have a tremendous amount of fights as well. We've seen promotion. It's such a pity that all of these super talented fighters, whether it's the Golovkins, even the Usyks to a certain extent, the Vasilis, the Beterbievs, Bivol, all of them have experienced significant problems from a promotional capacity, which have almost denied the world of their prime. Certainly with Golovkin, we know that. And with Vasily, he turned from maybe 2 Olympic titles. Maybe he should have turned over at 1. Well, I think we would have seen far more from him. But in any case, there was a lot of problems with the Leo Santa Cruzes, etc., in getting fights at feather. Hence, moving to 135. And even his detractors will say, oh, he's too small to beat X amount. So they even acknowledge it in their criticism for him. But with Beterbiev, with Yvonne Marshall, etc., it's just a pity with all of these obstacles and political wranglings, and now with geopolitics and economic sanctions on the Russian Federation, that we're seeing these problems. So Beterbiev has just had problem after problem with injuries, etc. And even now in his late 30s, it's a pity. But the one good thing we've had is that he's not had a lot of professional fights, and he's not had a lot of wars, etc. Not not a lot of wear and tear on the clock, even 12-round fights. So there's still a degree of preservation. So the fact that, I mean, it didn't look, didn't seem to be any major degradation that we could witness in these last couple of fights. So they mature like a wine, like a Glenfiddich, or like a proper single malt Scotch. So gives us a bit of it gives us a bit of encouragement that I mean, even if injury aside, now I think he's injured with the Yard fight, he's going to come back in 2023. So we're probably going to have to wait maybe another year for a potential next major fight that he's going to have. Why is that? I mean, why is Anthony Yard even getting the fight? He lost against Sergey Kovalev for the WBO championship as a mandatory. He lost against Lyndon Arthur, came back and won Lyndon Arthur. So what's that? 2 defeats in his last, what? I'm not sure if it's his last 3, it could be last 3 or 4 fights. So how on earth is he in a position to get a mandatory with Beterbiev straight away? That seems to me that seems crazy to me. I don't think he should be anywhere near a mandatory challenger. So it's just potential roadblocks to stopping this fight. It's ridiculous.
Yes, and he's getting it for probably the very same reason Deontay Wilder is fighting for the mandatory spot for WBC heavyweight.
Yeah, 2 defeats. Come back and you fight Robert. Ah, man. Disgusting. Anyway, official, over to you, my man, for position number 6.
Yes, all right. So our number 5 is Jesse Rodriguez. And yeah, hold on, let me share the screen. Just a second. Where is Jesse? Jesse Bam Rodriguez, proudly wearing those Taken trunks. Taken, who's been a great promoter for a long time, while having many fantastic legendary fighters. Jesse Rodriguez being one of them, definitely, and he's the future of boxing and one of the biggest talents in boxing. I'm not saying that the other ones, other greatly talented fighters do not exist at the moment, but he's definitely somewhere there on the front. What can I say? Beside what I already showed in the film studies on my channel, on this channel, we were the first ones. We did the first ever film study of Jesse Bam Rodriguez on YouTube. I mean, having another extremely talented fighter for a brother, Joshua Franco, surely helps. And yeah, we almost put even his brother on this top list because they're that talented. But Jesse Rodriguez, he's just unbelievable to watch. Very talented, quick, very dexterous. He can do multiple things. I would say the only thing that he would need to work on is fighting at short range. But same thing with Pacquiao, like it was the case with Pacquiao. As long as you have your feet that are quick enough, explosiveness, fitness, and you're able to get out of it, get away from it, no problem with it. And everything, beautiful combinations, fantastic counter punching. He's as explosive and as quick as he's cerebral. He's as cerebral as he is physical, quick, explosive, very nice punching power, very nice pop. My only problem with him would be, and it's something interesting where corruption in boxing and myself, we kind of disagree the way we look at it. But to me, even moving up at 115, he was still the bigger guy against Quadras and Sorungwisai, but it's not like he was fighting midgets comparing to him. In fact, though those are big fighters, very big fighters for their weight, for their weight class. They have been big on big fighters in their weight classes, and the way he performed against them is deserves high praises. Now, in my opinion, that Quadras fight was technically more challenging to him, for him, and Quadras was not to be underestimated because he's fantastic fighter and he's been a fantastic fighter for years. So even despite being on the downslide out of his prime, no doubt, just a year ago, or I don't know if there is even 2 years that passed since his fight with Estrada. To be honest, he was supposed to. I mean, everybody was expecting favoring Estrada to win the rematch, but the way that fight went on, the third round, which corruption in boxing perfectly exposed in our stream just a day after it happening, where the Mexican Commission timekeeper ended the third round, the round in which Cuadras terribly hurt Estrada multiple times, dropped him, and was probably, by the way it was looking to us, was definitely about to stop him. And they cut around 26 seconds short, if I'm not wrong, or maybe even more. And yeah, looking at it from that standpoint, uh, probably he was supposed to be the winner of his fight against the rematch against Estrada. So it just tells you how good Jesse Rodriguez is. Going from top of my head, I cannot even count all the things about him that I find amazing. If you want me to get a bit negative, I would say that what I don't like is also that he doesn't shy away from being dirty, going below the belt. And I'm not only saying about the Quadras fight, because Quadras himself was very dirty in that fight and maybe even went below the belt more times than Jesse Rodriguez. But yeah, that's something that I've seen in many of his other fights as I closely examined Bam Rodriguez. Uh, Not only that, pulling the opponents down, etc., but not to that point that I would be disgust. I mean, I don't like to see it at all, but to be honest, in comparison to some many really dirty fighters, he's not dirty at all. But that was just me giving you the negative side, because all the positives, we've mentioned it so many times, especially when I did my film studies, multiple film studies on Jesse Bam Rodriguez. And so definitely Jesse, he has a huge upside. Plus, he can move up. He has the size to move up to, even when he does what he's supposed to do at those weight classes at 112, 115, maybe perhaps 108, where he bucks before, but he could move up even to 118. And so that there are plenty of opportunities for him fighting at 115. Him or his brother, who was supposed in fact to fight Estrada, but Estrada chose not to fight him. Then at 112 there is another very extremely supremely talented fighter, and that is the Japanese uh, Jun.
Nakatani.
Yeah, Junto. Yeah, right. Yeah, Junto Nakatani. So not to be confused with the 135 Nakatani who fought Loma and Lopez. So Junto Nakatani, he's supremely talented southpaw. He's even bigger than Jesse Rodriguez is, and so if Jesse is able to beat those fighters, I mean, he can go only even higher on our pound for pound list, which I expect is going to happen in the future, in the following years. It also depends on will he be able to land the fights, big fights that he wants. But even going down to 112, I mean, Junto Nakatani being an even bigger fighter than himself, physically bigger, that would be a great victory, and people should not sleep on that Nakatani guy neither. And just like the card from Mexico the last night showed us, those low divisions, light flyweight, super flyweight, are fucking amazing to watch, and they should not be missed by real boxing fans. Corruption, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Rodriguez, a precocious talent, I'm not going to divulge on his high level, almost accelerated skill set, because full validation and edification of that is on, we've done some incredible film studies, which was our second ever stream on this channel, and we did a subsequent one quite recently as well. So there's in-depth, high quality film studies. So I would urge anybody who hasn't seen those, go back second show. We'll maybe put some links in the description to sort of redirect you to those, and those will essentially, they'll underscore as to why we've been following this guy since when he was free fights in very early. I spotted him very, very early, and I was like, wow, because what Jesse for me has is that, and I don't know whether official we've discussed it, but for me, he has Ukrainian footwork. So he has the Loma and Usyk footwork, even a Vodzik to a certain extent. But then he has almost a transformation in almost like a Kazakh attacking style, like a Golovkin or a Yanebek in terms of his explosiveness.
Sorry for cutting you off, but your mic is sounding bad.
Oh,
now it's great. Yeah, sorry for cutting you off. Go on.
Is that better? I'm not sure how much to you, but what I said is that he almost has an incarnation of the Ukrainian footwork, albeit like a Vasily and an Alexander, elements of their footwork, but with that sort of jab, timing, explosiveness of like a Kazakh Russian style. He has a lot of Yanebek in him, and he has a lot of Gennady Golovkin in him. So it's different elements of his lower body and his upper body. He always has that Ukrainian Kazakh style combined with a little bit of Mexican style, which obviously is a product of his DNA as well. That's why for me it makes it.
You're muffled again. You're sounding muffled.
I'll jump back in, yeah.
Well, now you sound fantastic, but yeah. But anyways, I heard you. Yeah, that in fact you never mentioned it to me, but yeah, that's a fantastic point. Ukrainian footwork.
And it's no surprise. I mean, Jesse, we know, he's talked about that he tries to emulate, or Vasily is one of his favorite fighters, so naturally he's trying to incorporate elements of his. Certainly the pivot he does on the blindside angles to set up his body work is very reminiscent of what Vasily did at flyweight. So what I mean, you couldn't have a better fighter to model to sort of model your boxing stance, but try and be contemporary and individualist, not just be a perfect sort of genetic clone of a fighter, but to have your own DNA, to have your own identity. And we know he's getting better as well. He's working elements on his inside game to try and be a more of an effective fighter at short range, where he needs to be on the inside, certainly chest to chest, where he has shown some deficiencies in the past as well. And we know the fear he generates, because rumor has it that Kenshiro Tajira and Hiroto Kiyoguchi are finally unifying now, and they've waited until Rodriguez has gone out of the division to do so, because before all Tekken efforts to make that fight, even in Japan, were roadblocked. So so those guys have been fearing him. They've been waiting for him to get out of the division as well, so they could finally have that unification that me in particular has been clamoring for the best part of 2-3 years. So crazy.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I haven't thought about it, but I remember you told me about it before that. Yeah, I completely forgot that Jesse Bam Rodriguez was there in that equation along with Kyoguchi and Teraji. Yeah,
But Eddie Hearn is stopping that. Eddie Hearn doesn't want him fighting in Japan. Eddie Hearn
yeah.
either wants him either in the States or in the UK. Maybe move around the States. So I'm not sure how that relationship is going to work. I don't know who pulls rank, or whether Eddie Hearn is just the international promoter, whether he has exclusive rights for him now. I'm not quite sure on the relationship, but I'm pretty sure Tekken still holds the registration. But next fight he's fighting against Israel Gonzalez. So another
Yeah,
good fight.
that's right. On the card of Golovkin Canelo 3.
Good, keep him busy. Israel Gonzalez is a highly competent fighter. May not be top tier A level, but he's given good fights against world champions in Gonzalez and Cal Yafai. Maybe should have been the world champion against Cal Yafai. Absolutely should have been the world champion. So, and he's a big super flyweight as well. So maybe it's a bit of a showcase fight, but why not have him on what's probably going to be the biggest card of the year in Golovkin and Alvarez? So why not showcase his skills there?
If that's a showcase fight, that's a fucking fantastic showcase fight. Because yeah, Jesse Rodriguez, I mean, he's huge. I mean, huge for 115. And well, we went in details when it comes to him when he faced Chocolatito Gonzalez, and we did a lengthy stream going really into details and how deserving he was of getting the victory in Monaco against Khalid Yafai. Got robbed. You can freely say he got robbed against Khalid Yafai. So yeah, if that's a showcase, that's an amazing out of this world showcase. And yeah, Jesse, well, that's another opportunity, even for the bad things that I said about him, like not bad things, but the counter arguments against Jesse Rodriguez, where I mentioned that he was bigger than his opponents. Well, this is another opportunity to shut me up and anybody else that would use that argument. And yeah, so in that sense, I love that fight. And yeah, Israel Gonzalez, he's man, he would be champion in some other weight classes, weaker weight classes. But being that 115 is, in my opinion, and has been the best box division in boxing for the past 10 years at least. Yeah.
I think what Eddie Hearn is playing a bit of a waiting game. He's got two. If he's got a Strider and he's got Jesse at 115 pounds now, Jesse's not going to fight his brother for the WBA championship. So I think what Eddie Hearn is looking to do is once Estrada and Gonzalez, once that fight is made, probably for the end of this year, I think it's probably going to be just for this the franchise championship. I think Eddie Hearn will probably put him in against the winner of Estrada and Gonzalez. I think that's what Eddie Hearn's plans are. I think that'll be for sometime in the early part of next year, around February, March, April. In a super fight. And that could be the changing of the guard there. I think that's what Eddie Hearn is hoping for. But when you're fighting potentially against one of the greatest fighters who ever lived in Roman Gonzalez, a guy who can turn back the clock, reinvent himself like a chameleon, we never. That's a mouth-watering fight. Young and the old, two elite level skill sets. Yeah, that could be a spectacular fight. So let's hope Gonzalez finally gets his dues, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Anything? I think we've said enough on Rodriguez official.
Yeah, definitely. We can move up to the number 4, because we also have a few words to say about the honorable mentions. So go on.
Our number 4 is very similar to our original top 4, because there hasn't been any significant changes. In fact, the guys in most of the people in our top 4 have they've reinforced their position with spectacular performances. But the number 4 position, to a lot of the YTBC, it may be a little bit polarizing, but not for us, because nothing really has happened for him to be removed from the list, etc. And Vasily Lomachenko, number 4 on our pound for pound list. Now, Vasily since has fought in his comeback, had a fight with Nakatani, who put on some tremendous performances, both against Teofimo Lopez and Felix Verdejo, in stopping Verdejo, considered a real threat at 135 pounds. Vasily in his comeback put on an excellent performance against him, stopped Nakatani. Really looked. There was people were a little bit not sure about the surgery after the Teofimo Lopez, in which unfortunately he had to have surgery. I think it was a couple of days after of losing his.
A day after. Sorry.
Was it a day after? Yeah, a day or 2 days after. Yeah, it was almost immediately. But Nakatani, and then coming back later on against Richard Comey, a former IBF champion as well, putting on a good performance against him. Relatively comfortable in victory, but Comey showed enormous heart and tenacity. Wasn't prepared for his corner to retire him, etc. But I think Vasily was a little bit. I don't think Vasily really wanted to put down a beating on Comey. I think he could have probably got him out of there. Maybe he took pity on Comey. Very nice guy. Kind of an honourable sort of fighter. Vasily was almost intimating to the referee, "Do you really want to stop the fight?" I don't really like to see that too much. Let the referee do their jobs, but there was no question that he was the dominant fighter pretty much throughout the fight. So, and Vasily unfortunately has lost a little bit of time being back in Ukraine. So preparation for any forthcoming fights, I think he's been scheduled now against a top-ranked fighter just to clean off a bit of ring rust, etc. But top rank are looking to put him in the ring with Devin Haney sometime early part of the year. But many may argue that Vasily has not done anything in the last year to justify him being in the power. We've heard a hell of a lot of criticism about him, but why should he be out of the rings? Are you telling me there are even 7 or 8 fighters who have a better level of skill set to Lomachenko? Get the fuck out of here. No way. This guy's skills are just elite, almost top 3, top 4 level. You could even argue that his natural skills are better than any fighter in the game. I wouldn't have a major counter argument towards that. A superior level of skills, and we got to mention that Vasily is now fighting at his third weight category. He's broken world records, both at super flyweight, at featherweight, super featherweight. Pretty much acknowledges he really shouldn't be fighting at lightweight. He's just too small at only sort of 5 feet 5, 5 feet 6 inches, with not an elongated reach as well. But he's still beating up fighters so much bigger than him. And you can argue all you want against Teofimo Lopez. All right, he may have been outworked if he won in the first 6 rounds, but when the fight commenced from the 6th round, who won the fight? Lomachenko clearly won the fight, put a beating down on Lopez. So don't tell me that Teofimo Lopez was, put a beating down on Vasily. You clearly didn't watch the fight. Any guy who came into the fight with an injury that it was indicated to VADA, that Lopez knew had an existing injury coming in. So Vasily was going to be, he's going to be reticent, and that's what he was. But did Lopez land any significant punches in the first 6 rounds? We've done film studies. No, he didn't. Vasily didn't ship hardly any punishment. But when his body, it was about calibrating what he could from his body without deteriorating the shoulder anymore, to the extent at which he wouldn't be able to box anymore. And this is an injury that he's had for a very long time as well. So it was a recurring injury. So the vulnerability of his body was still there, but you got to give credit to him. He thought he could beat Lopez even with one arm. It might be overly arrogant and bold, but that's what these fighters are like. That's the medal they have. They feel they can win world championships in their first professional fight, second fight. Doesn't matter to them. Challenges are nothing to these guys. They don't matter if Orlando Ciolido is vacating his belt, deliberately coming in heavy, landing 40 low blows. Doesn't matter to these guys. They're prepared to tolerate all of that, the injustices that come along with it. When you challenge yourself, defeats inevitably happen, but that's the key. When you challenge yourself, when you really challenge yourself, when you go to weight categories that you shouldn't be at, and you still lay down a feeding on fighters who are natural welterweights, who are heavy-handed fighters in their prime, in like a Lopez, So I think people really look at Vasily in the wrong way. Such a polarizing figure, for the sense that people think he's been given privilege after privilege. But when they look at a Jermell Charlo who has defeats, the difference between Jermell Charlo and Vasily Lomachenko, there's exponential differences in their skills, etc., and their achievements. But Jermell Charlo was granted the opportunity to avenge his losses. Vasily wasn't. If you can even call them losses, that's the difference. If Vasily was given the chance to avenge his loss against Orlando Ciolido and Teofimo Lopez, Do you really think the level of criticism would be as forthcoming as what it is, and as what it is currently within the YTBC? You know, with specifically him and Golovkin. No, I mean, he would be the undisputed champion. And let's get on to this. Let's get on to this Devin Haney situation, because just the level of misinformation that is out on the, and we know the the Devin Haney demographics, and his fanboys will never ever accept the truth, even when the truth has been produced in actual video footage of Devin Haney's father, and I'll almost quote him directly, verbatim, saying that we had the opportunity of fighting Vasily Lomachenko as the guaranteed mandatory, but instead we chose to fight for the interim belt. So that is Bill Haney explicitly telling you that the reason why in which the fight didn't happen with Lomachenko is not because Vasily decided to duck him and vacate his WBC championship in favor for the franchise championship. No, it's because Bill Haney and his son Devin Haney did not want to fight Lomachenko for the mandatory, and nor do the timetables support it, because Devin Haney obviously picked up injuries. He had a shoulder injury, and he was given a champion in recess. And then when he came back, there was fights against Santiago, and then Yuriorkis Gamboa. So, and then Vasily unfortunately was hit by COVID, in which boxing shut down in the United States, and that delayed the fight with Teofimo Lopez. And then eventually they fought. Lopez and Vasily fought, I think, under closed doors, and that was for the undisputed championship. So there is no ambiguity in this matter. Vasily Lomachenko and Igor Klimas didn't even know what the franchise championship was. Igor Klimas had to contact the WBC president for clarification, and they were given reassurance that a WBC franchise championship would be unifiable unless the now rescinded and residual WBC regular title, and that it wouldn't stop Vasily in pursuing his ambitions for the undisputed championship. So the WBC couldn't order and mandate the title by virtue of Devin Haney deciding to fight for the interim and the regular championship eventually when he was upgraded. So the fight was never ordered, the fight was never sanctioned, and the fight later on could not actually have happened due to the sort of aforementioned timetables. And later on, when the negotiations were starting with George Kambosos and Devin Haney, they were procrastinating. Vasily had agreed terms pretty much with George Kambosos straight away, didn't haggle over money. And then Devin Haney realized that his opportunity was grasping, then wanted the same terms to be offered to him. So just bitch-ass tactics from Devin Haney over and over again, as well as not to mention the racism, the comments in which he's dropped over and over, both him and his father. They've just been on a campaign to discredit Vasily on various racist boxing channels. It's disgusting. It's almost sad, the levels in which Bill Haney has stooped to, criticizing Vasily, and not only what level, what has been his function back in Ukraine when, his country is being obliterated for reasons I'll get into later on. But just disgusting overall. But it doesn't matter, official. Vasily Lomachenko, number 4 on the rankings. No problem from our sense.
Oh, yeah, so beautifully said. I mean, let me preface it with this. Uh, or better not go there. Better not go into Haney's private life because I can get so vicious. But the thing is, look, at one hand, I mean, you already explained how he no doubt ducked Lomachenko, and it was not the other way around. Uh, we are talking about Haney. Yeah, oh, okay. So Haney, who's a natural 147 pounder, he's a fucking welterweight, and he cannot punch his way out of a wet paper bag. Um, so the way he's fighting at 135 with his size, what is pound for pound about it? Nothing at all. On the other hand, Vasily Lomachenko, he may not have all-time greats on his resume, but being that he's a smaller fighter who moved up, who, as you can easily see even on this picture that is on the screen, he had to add muscle weight to his upper body, to his neck, traps, upper and lower arms, probably in his feet to move up to fight these guys at 135 who are way bigger very often, 2 weight classes bigger than him, like it was the case with Nakatani, with Teofimo Lopez, etc. Meanwhile, Haney, he was getting hurt and hugging Linares way past his prime. Linares, way past his prime. Linares. I mean, he was not completely shot, but he was really out of his prime. Uh, he was hugging Linares to survive and asking after the fight for his what does Linares think of his power. That shows you how not of a puncher, how soft of a puncher he is. On the other hand, Linares, when Loma beat him, and it was Loma's first fight at 135, people were criticizing Loma, saying that Linares was out of his prime. You may argue that he was starting to age over, that he was on the downslide, but he was not the same version that Haney fought. Haney fought a much weaker version, and the way Lomachenko disposed of Linares was A-level stuff, no doubt. So much superior performance in comparison to Haney's performance, no doubt. And that is not the only problem. The other problem is let's take Yuriorkis Gamboa, for example. Many of those fanboys of Haney, they were either not born yet, I mean, or they were kids, they were young. It was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Bob Arum mentioned Yuriorkis Gamboa as a potential opponent, or 4 years ago. I think it was 5, as a potential opponent for Vasily Lomachenko. LDBC and all these racist fake boxing fans mm, who are giving more importance to fighters' DNA tests than their fighting abilities. They went on to call out Loma, who didn't even end up fighting Yuriorkis. And Yuriorkis was really, it was easy to see that he was shot by the time 5 years ago. And fanboys who now who are pretending that they are fans of Haney, well, they were crying about it. But when Haney fought him, again, the same welterweight freezing down to 135, Haney, yeah, he went 12 rounds with Yuriorkis, and he was afraid of his counters. He was extremely tentative. What is pound for pound about it? I don't fucking know corruption in boxing, but I would really love for someone to explain me. And earlier, you mentioned, you said a lot of great spot on things. Um, I was also about to say, just like you did, Lomachenko. if you take a look at pure skills for anyone from these top 10 that we are doing, him alongside with another fighter on our top list is definitely their skill sets are way above anyone else in boxing when it comes to pure skill sets, nothing else. And many things could be said. Yeah, but go on.
And absolutely, and officially, I mean, Vasily Lomachenko hasn't even had a single fight in the Ukraine. You know, these guys have almost based their operations in what is the the epicenter of boxing. So we talked about it, road warriors, and that has to be a crucial, almost a prerequisite factor in determining what is a pound for pound. And if you're angry,
You're sounding muffled again. Sorry.
Is that better?
No, same thing.
What about now?
Same.
Is it still muffled?
Yeah, just slightly better, but still muffled.
I think it's Bill Haney. I think he's put a virus on my system.
I think you sound a bit better now.
All right. But official, you know, we were basically talking and comparing and contrasting Vasily and say Devin Haney, because a lot of people are saying, well, Devin Haney is an undefeated, undisputed champion. Like belts take precedence over skills and achievements. They don't. And the original composition of the pound for pound, if you actually read the text, talk about what it was designed for, about shrinking or elevating your existing skill sets to different weight categories to see how you would do. It has nothing to do with belts whatsoever. And given that we're in an era where there's 80 belts in 17 weight divisions, so belts are just irrelevant. It's about the level of opposition. Now, if the level of opposition, if you have a superior world-class fighter who has a belt, then of course that elevates the level of victory. It's just natural logic. But with Devin Haney, and for the excellent reasons you mentioned, against Yuriorkis Gamboa, if you look at his weight, he was 159 pounds on fight night. Against a blown up feather bantamweight. And what did he do in the fight? Was that truly a pound? Maybe it was a bit of a coming out party, but what did he do? He did absolutely nothing. Couldn't even inflict damage on the fighter who'd been floored 17 times in his previous fights. And what happened to Gamboa when he fought Issa Cruz recently? That's what you should be doing to Gamboa. You know, ragdolling him, beating him up, and flooring him 4 times in a pretty quick victory. That's how you should be deposing of the old guard, especially fighters who are blown up, who are washed up. You know, you should be pulverizing them. That's what a pound for pound level fighter is. And Devin Haney labored to victory. And against George Kambosos, you know, the guy had clinched 20 times before round 4. You know, that's not what you do when you have all the advantages. You've got the ability, and even Shakur Stevens to a certain extent, when he decides close to victory, you don't put forward, you don't show that you have the ability, you don't have the killer instinct to take.
Sorry, Bill Haney is fucking up your microphone again.
Let me drop out. I'll be back here.
Okay, no problem. I'll add you back in. Yeah, man. And against Teofimo Lopez, his surgery was scheduled before the fight for the day after, and whoever said that Teofimo Lopez, I quote, beat up Lomachenko, does not know what he's talking about, because that first half of the fight, where most of the rounds, but not all, but most of the rounds went to Teofimo effectively. Most of the times, Teofimo maybe landed one more punch than Loma, because Loma was being cagey and overly defensive. So that beat up part, I don't know where is it coming from. Don't get me wrong, those rounds, most of them from the first half, for both me and Corruption, we gave them to Teofimo, but based on aggressiveness. But there were even rounds in that first half that Lomachenko was outlanding him, but simply because Teofimo was the aggressor. We scored those rounds for him based on that, on the aggressiveness. That was not so effective, by the way. But once Loma had to go all out, we saw what happened. And again, one more time, this is against a fighter who's, if today we had the same day weigh-in, Teofimo Lopez is another one who would be a welterweight in today's boxing. And just tells you about the level that Vasily Lomachenko is operating at. I don't know. I'm not seeing Corruption yet, but he's probably fixing his mic. Yeah, but being that he already, both of us said a lot about Loma, I think it's the right moment to go to the next one, to the number 3 spot. And so, Corruption, you're back on. Please go on.
Okay, Bill and 69 Sports Radio, whoever's helping Bill. I've just installed my update of Norton and McAfee antivirus. Reinforced my firewall, so I should be okay now.
Yeah, so where were you at? You were talking about Haney.
Yeah, the roast Devin Haney. I can't even remember where I was, but the Kambosos fight. Now, I think it may have been a decisive victory, but what did George Kambosos actually do in that fight? He was just leaning over his front foot. It was almost a stark contrast to the urgency and the fighting spirit and the attacking force he showed in the Teofimo Lopez fight. But when you've paid somebody £10 million, I think George Kambosos pretty much capitulated. Maybe money took precedence over honor. Talking about hailing from Sparta, I think he was an absolute embarrassment in that fight. But he's got an opportunity to redeem himself in the rematch. But Kambosos, he really just had one really good victory. If you go back and look at the Lee Selby fight, Lee Selby was just tagging him left, right, and center. Although Kambosos probably definitely did win the fight, but Lee Selby, who clearly shouldn't have been at 135 pounds, was competitive in the fight. Wasn't even really hurt in the fight. So maybe Kambosos overachieved in the Lopez fight. Got to capitalized on a mentally broken fighter, Teofimo Lopez. Looking at, breaking down in tears at the weigh-in, you could see he was on a heavy level of medication. I think they were giving him diazepam, lorazepam. I think they were injecting it up his rectum because he was looking almost what they do to sort of drug addicts in addictions clinics. You could see the erratic way in which his emotional state of mind, the pendulum was swinging. He was mentally shot. So many difficulties with his father, cucked by his wife, broken marriage. He's just an extremely erratic community introduction, and then thought he was the big man after the so-called victory. Decided to try and hedge the amount he could actually negotiate for. Didn't want anything to do with Top Rank. Thought he'd won the lottery when the Thriller fight was made. I love that picture he did with all of his belts and whatever it was, the winning purse bid of 6 point something million. He had that on as his thumbnail to one of his social media things, only for only for that to implode. And then obviously Eddie Hearn and sort of Matchroom winning, staging the fight, etc., and then losing the fight, and then saying it was a conspiracy to take the belts away from him. So what an erratic character Lopez has been. Yeah. Not really much more to say on the position number 4 official. I don't know whether you've got anything to add.
No. We said enough about Loma in his case. Yeah, fantastic. Let's go to
number 3 now. Number 3, I'm not sure what position he was in our previous one. He may have been. Was he
number 5? He was number 5.
Okay, but number 3, I think.
Yes.
Roman Gonzalez. I think you can make an argument that he may have even been heavier at number 5. But since the unification with Francisco Estrada, in which Roman Gonzalez was cruelly denied in quite what was, I think, a bad decision, and I think pretty much 95% of the wider boxing community agrees that Gonzalez definitely did enough to have been champion. Should have been the unified champion. Would have been his first, unification franchise in his existing WBA championship. We've seen Roman Gonzalez waiting for yet another Estrada fighter when he fights, but during the interim, Rey Martinez, the WBC champion at flyweight. Rey Martinez, who many thought would come up and potentially put down a beating on Gonzalez, but people underestimated the resolve and the ability of Gonzalez, even in his 50+ fights. But when you have one of the greatest skill sets in which I've ever witnessed, but the ability to adapt in each generation he's fought, in each decade he's fought. Just one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen in Roman Gonzalez, even at super flyweight up against a fighter who was heavier. So we can see Rey Martinez was definitely the bigger fighter, heavy-handed fighter, super aggressive fighter. But Roman Gonzalez just put a comprehensive, outboxed him throughout the fight, had trouble, really schooled, I think, humbled, surprised a very good fighter in, Rey Martinez, who probably was even juiced up as well for the fight. Just shows the levels of Gonzalez. It didn't matter that they wanted Eddie Hearn, Estrada. They sort of engineered some sort of excuse to try and sort of destabilize Gonzalez, and then put in Rey Martinez to try and soften up Gonzalez for a forthcoming. This was all an Eddie Hearn in-house strategy, maybe using Rey Martinez as some sort of a sacrificial definitely to try and procrastinate the fight, weigh down Gonzalez, even beat him up, even potentially knock him out, take over the berth, and then have, an in-house unification with Estrada, but it all backfired. Eddie Hearn had to rob Gonzalez cruelly the first time to try and placate him with $1 million and say, oh, this is his biggest payday, to think that Gonzalez would be content with that, not knowing what Gonzalez and the amount of money that Gonzalez does, the amount of contributions he gives, a lot of the money went into developing a hospital back in Nicaragua, not understanding the humanitarian Gonzalez is back in Nicaragua. But nothing really, nothing more to add on Roman Gonzalez, one of the greatest fighters of all time, still top 3, top 2, could even be first. I don't think he even should be an undefeated fighter, just an exemplification of everything that I personally look for in a fighter. Humility, humbleness, skills, the ability to keep fighting at a later age, to reinvent yourself, to almost become better in certain aspects to what he was at early on with his defensive abilities now. Not really as super aggressive, because we know there is wear and tear on him, but his ability to almost change, can go into shoulder roll, can block punches with elbows, shoulders, pivot side to side, unique foot placement on the inside. Probably not a better inside fighter in all boxing. Fully justified, fully vindicated his number 3 spot. One of the greats, true greats.
Oh yeah. Oh look, I'm not hiding it. If Pekka for me is, and he is the best of all times to me, on his accomplishments, amazing, incredible accomplishments. Chocolatito is the best ever when I've seen when it comes to his skill set, timing. Mind blowing. And at his age, which makes him an ancient or perhaps a dinosaur at flyweight, in flyweight division. What if he's about to be 35? If he's not already, he will be soon. This current string of victories is fantastic, and people, look, we should have done from the beginning of the show. We should mention for every fighter, like it was the case with Loma or with Chocolatito, before every single of their fights, we should remind people that these are small, tiny guys who are fighting above their natural weight class. Because being that he's been at 115, which he kind of adapted in not 100% definitely, but because you cannot grow up in size. But he got used to 115, but people forget that he's still fighting in a division where his opponents are way bigger than him. And so beating the other champions at those weight classes is simply great, and the way he's beating them is even better. The string of victories he went through, so Israel Gonzalez, the Khalid Kaliafai, Mexican that you mentioned earlier, I forgot his name, from Canelo's gym, and Ray Martinez, as well as Juan Francisco Estrada, is fucking great. And I don't know what to say. It's an exceptional fighter. My probably, when it comes to his boxing, the way he fights, my favorite fighter of all time.
Yeah, and two things as well. Gonzalez has victories either before or after against, I think, 3 or 4 unified champions in his resume. And let's not mention that. Let's not mention that a clean athlete, history of fully transparent drug testing. And you can only have a look at his body now. Does Roman Gonzalez look like somebody who's injected EPO into his abdominals? You can see baby fat all on his around his waistline, etc. He's never a ripped athlete, whatever. For God's sake, he's Chocolatito. Just by his name, you know what his diet is gonna be. So, yeah. Whereas a lot of the other athletes, even certainly some of the athletes, even in lower weight divisions, have been called, taking multiple levels of performance enhancing, and we can see their ripped bodies, etc. But Gonzalez still doing it clean as a veteran in weight categories in which we know these fights they have a maximum shelf life, and the shelf life is not in their 30s. So he's defying almost age, time, and the natural sort of degradation of a body, and even the metabolism and the ability to even throw punches. So credit to him. I think and he's a man of faith as well. It's just nothing to hate about this guy. He's just a fighter you have to admire, but even still, people criticize him over the years because they never really got to see him in his prime when he was fighting in Japan, winning lineal championships in Japan from Nicaragua. He's fought in Mexico, America. He's won world championships all over the planet as well. So the other factors we talk about, coming out of your comfort zone and fighting on the road and doing it in decisive fashion, not even really having many difficult fights upcoming as well. Just putting beatings down on all of the great fighters he fought in the past, and still beating up much bigger men, in Estrada now. Fight anyone. He's already talked. He'd fight Ioka in Japan, but Ioka is, I don't know what the hell he's doing. He's looking bad all the time. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and one more thing, very important thing. Earlier you mentioned, you talked about his skill set, etc. What the amazing thing he's able to do. I would just say that despite being really old for his weight class, and that he lost, I'm definitely seeing that he lost snap on his punches and quickness, etc. Okay, work rate is still there, but technically he's even better fighter now because his defense improved so much. One of our friends who said on his own stream that he was getting hit too much against Israel Gonzalez, which I said was nonsense, because that fight, for example, with volume of punches that Israel Gonzalez threw at Chocolatito was amazing when it comes to Chocolatito's defense. His defense is tighter than ever. Yes, he aged, he lost the physical capabilities to some degree, but he improved his defense. It's looking better than ever, more compact, and a huge credit to him.
I mean, I did actually a film analysis, and Gonzalez blocks and parries more punches in boxing than anybody else with his gloves, his forearms, and his elbows. And that's a testament to his defensive ability. So when people are talking about he's actually getting hit, I think you're going to have to look at it in slow motion, and you're going to have to zoom it, and you'll be surprised to find how many punches he blocks and parries, both with different facets of his arms at different positions, whether it's head and body shots. yeah, he's just on another level, and that's what he's done to supplement, as you mentioned, is the fact that yeah, there is degradation certainly in his legs, the snapness, the acceleration, and maybe the heavy hand. Maybe he's not even sitting down and loaded up on his punches that much anymore. He doesn't need to. He's using just deceptive variations in speed and power. So I think he's more of a. There's just a lot more. It's almost it's a smoother action almost official to what he was fighting before. It's almost seamless. There's not waste actions. There's not just huge loading up and twisting and arcing his body like an Alvarez. Big roaring hooks that are so telegraphed. It's seamless. I think that works well for a fighter at that stage because it allows him to conserve energy a lot better. So I think it's working well for him, and credit to his new coach, Giegas, after, his former coach and that died as well. So he's had to deal with that as well. Let's not forget, his coach, who was very much like they were very, very, very close, almost like a father figure. So he's had to deal with personal tragedy and then come back and just try and, implement and acclimate to whatever his new coach is laying down and adapting to what his body will allow him to do as well. So scientific as well as technical. Yeah. Great. And I think that'll do it. I think that'll do it for number 3. Shall we move on to 2, official?
Absolutely, yeah. Please go on.
Hit it, man.
Sorry,
right.
Go on.
I think this will be yours, man. I think we're rotating, man. But it doesn't matter. It's Cetrus Paribus.
Yeah, sorry, it took me some time to set up the background picture. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, now, yeah, yeah, it was pretty difficult. You can make pretty much the case for anyone on our top 4 or 3. They have about as equal rights to claim the number 1 spot. So now, yeah, Inoue, he's doing with his opponents what he's supposed to do, and pound for pound, probably the hardest punchers in boxing, no doubt to me. But I don't remember anyone coming as close. Maybe perhaps Acosta from light flyweight, but other than that, Inoue with his explosiveness, he's well-rounded fighter, iron chin, which he showed in the first fight against Donaire. I do think that his run at 118 is a great run. Now, to those who disagree with me, it just means to me that that they don't really know those fighters that he was fighting. I mean, what he did earlier in his career. Go on?
No, I didn't say anything. It's probably Bill Haney.
Go on.
No, are you finished?
Oh, no, but I'm interested.
No. No, I mentioned I didn't interrupt. So I think probably heard some negative feedback anyway. I was silent.
Oh, okay.
Finish and I'll finish off.
Yeah, okay. So he's well-rounded fighter, so he can do a bit of everything. He has impressive timing. Yeah, even Scott 17, the chat room, he heard you mentioning Bill Haley again. But yeah, anyway, I mean, his run at 118 is impressive, and look, plus he's not being a diva. Those racist fanboys of certain fighters, they're not. They're now complaining about Inoue because first, like we said, they don't know, they're not aware of the weight class that he's fighting at currently and the fighters that he beat. Now, when it comes to his earlier fights, accomplishments in the lower weight classes, I don't want even to get into it because it was a long time ago and we are basing our pound for pound list on the recent accomplishment from the past 3, maybe let's say 4 years at top. But what Inoue did in meantime is really impressive, and he showed that he can fight against the guys who are bigger than himself. When it comes to Donaire rematch, look, a lot of boxing fans, even hardcore boxing fans, true boxing fans, uh, are taking looking at it wrong, in my opinion. It's not that Donaire was shot because to me he was like a fine wine at his age. Even after the first Inoue fight, he was doing extremely well. Donaire's timing was still impressive to me. The way he was timing Nordin Ubali just a couple of months ago, a year ago, cannot remember, but not too long ago. So his sharpness was impressive. So in those LGBT retards and fake fans of Heaney, I mean, pretending that Donaire was old. No, this was not the case of Inoue beating a shell of himself, Donaire. On the contrary, Donaire was sharp. The thing is, since their first fight, Inoue gained a lot of confidence in his own chin, in taking Donaire's absolutely amazing power, explosiveness, and his self-belief in his abilities to hurt Donaire himself. And if he caught Donaire with those punches in the first fight, the result, in my opinion, would be the same. Or even if he fought Donaire, I don't know, 5 years ago, the result would be the same. And Donaire himself has a very good chin. I mean,
Fantastic
and
chin.
he's,
Yeah.
yeah, and he's on the bigger side of 115. So yeah, it's completely retarded for someone to say that all fighters are the same. First of all, not all the fighters hit their primes at the same age. Just like that, the same way they don't get out of their prime at the same age, they do not get shot at the same age. And with the sharpness that Donaire showed in his recent fights on Showtime, etc., this is just an ever bigger credit to Inoue. And right now, unlike being a diva, he wants to fight, to move up and fight full time. He'll probably, we can say, dispose of him. And in the meantime, he's going to take care of Butler to become the undisputed, and that's it. Go on.
I mean, the nonsensical hatred, discrimination, prejudice, whatever you want to coin against Inoue is almost twofold official. Number one, unfortunately, that demographic says that Inoue, he's too small. Our people are not even in those weight categories, so I don't consider him to be intimidating because he's too small. So I don't look at bantamweights. My minimum threshold is featherweight, so I don't even look at fighters below that because they're too small. just one of the most stupid reasons you could ever fathom a human being to make. And the second reason being is that double standards. There's always standards for Asians, say even Russian, Ukrainian fighters, and other standards for American fighters, African American fighters. For Noah Inoue to be seriously considered a world championship or even a pound for pound level fighter, he has to come and fight in the United States, and he has to move up and beat Stephen Fulton, who just happens to be an African American fighter. It's never the opposite. It's like, say, example with Errol Spence. Errol Spence started off his career at 152 pounds, but for the last 10 years since the Olympics has been fighting at 147 pounds. So he shrank himself down as a professional. So he's defying against what your natural body's metabolism would be doing. And also, as you become more affluent and wealthy, you have access to more food, greater food. So your ability to eat more, consume more, so your weight naturally goes up. Now, the counter argument would be that you're more wealthy, that you have better access to gyms, training facilities, strength and conditioners, coaches, chemists to actually keep your weight at a certain level. But my argument being is that you're not challenging yourself. And with Errol Spence, we can clearly see that he suspended all drug testing. The only drug testing he had to do was against Mikey Garcia, because Mikey Garcia was moving up 2 weights. So he insisted on VADA testing, and it's no coincidence that Errol Spence couldn't knock him out. He gave all of the excuses under the sun, but the fact that he never really had the strength, he never had his EPO injected to his abdominals, which he pretty much did. And he had it certainly for the Ugas fight, because he threw an unnatural number of power punches throughout the fight that that there's no way his endurance would be able to sustain if he wasn't aided by performance enhancing substances. So, but with these fighters, there's always, you've got to move up. Inoue has to move up for him to justify that. Now, Stephen Fulton is a unified champion. What do you think would happen if Inoue moved up? He's already gone up 3 weights. He's already laid waste to the Adrian Hernandez and the Omar Narvaez, world record holder, to beat a Nonito Donaire, who is a world record holder at bantamweight. And you could argue that since the first fight, he actually had better momentum coming into this championship fight, in destroying Nordin Bali and the Filipino fight, Reynard Gabao, who had beaten Emmanuel Rodriguez. The way that knockout of Reynard was absolutely vicious, and the way he destroyed, Bali. So Nonito had good momentum, and I think with Inoue, he had to have a title defense against, I think, a Thai fighter back in Japan, but Japan was unfortunately hit with a hell of a lot of domestic restrictions and lockdowns, etc. So Inoue's career was a little bit stifled, but he's fought in the United States. I think he fought Maloney over in the States, and look at the way he dismantled Maloney. That was just an exhibition of power punching. It's just a destructive machine. And I think if he moved up to bantamweight, I think he would walk down Fulton, and I don't even think it would be a competitive fight. And for those who think Stephen Fulton deserves a spot, so let's just put that in very quickly now. When Fulton beat Angela Leo in a competitive fight, struggled against Figueroa, in the unification, many felt that Figueroa had won, but all right, close fight, could have gone either way. And when he fought Danny Roman recently, Roman, a former unified champion, come on, man, look at the way he fought him. Excessive movement to try and suppress a smaller fighter who has shorter arms, who really can only fight at a certain range. Roman likes to break down his opponents, is a terrific body and counter puncher. And what did Fulton do when Roman was able to block and parry some of his jabs and power punches and slip and try and get in on the inside? Fulton would just smother him, neutralize him, because he didn't have either the ability or the willingness to fight on the inside. Now, is that a pound for pound level fighter who doesn't even have the ability to fight against a smaller fighter, against a fighter arguably past his best as well on the inside? But later on, for the judges, you open up later on once you've tied him down, you've suppressed him, you've leaned on him, and then you open up a little bit at the end, a little bit of insurrection to try and remind the judges that you were going to get the decision, no doubt. Anyway, there's no way Al Heyman is going to allow his undefeated world champion to lose against a fighter. He's been beaten 2 or 3 times before. You want to keep him fresh for any potential. The PBC have been on an undisputed run recently, so maybe they're trying to save Fulton for that. But to me, Fulton is a good fighter, no doubt about it. He does have a good level of skill set, but he doesn't have the punching power, nor does he have the ability to fight on the inside, certainly against good inside and counter punches. There's too much lateral movement, too much running away, and there's just too much smothering. And to me, that was disappointing. I was disappointed when I see that, because he put forward a terrific effort against Figueroa, who is a good fighter, super aggressive, high volume punches, both of them, because they have to be. They're not concussive punches, not devastating punches. So you're going to have to, supplement that with volume and break down your opponent. So I think Inoue, and he's a slapping puncher as well. So technically, he's not a knuckle puncher as well. Inoue is the antithesis of Stephen Fulton. I think the power will carry forward. I don't see a problem going up 4 pounds. But in any case, even if Inoue's power is even, say, 50% less than what it is at bantamweight, Inoue is just a supremely better fighter, has a better jab, is a better two-handed puncher, can fight very good on the counter punch as well, can cut off the ring a lot better than Fulton, can move, is more explosive, has quicker hands, I think has quicker feet. Just the overall a significantly better fighter, and I think he'll stop Fulton. May not be early, but I think he'll dictate, he'll dominate, and I think he'll give him a real beating. And I think Stephen Fulton really knows that, and I think he's praying that he stays at bantam and he doesn't move up to super bantamweight. But Casimero, we've seen with Casimero, that would be a good test for Inoue, because somebody who can punch. But Casimero has had all of the opportunities. That fight could have been made very easy, but Sean Gibbons has put down all of the excuses. Now he's unfortunately having to. That fight is not going to happen, and Paul Butler's going to come in. But you can't deny Inoue the opportunity of being undisputed. We know he's number one. He won the World Big Boxing. He's beaten Nonino Donaire, and the way he beat him in the second fight as well was, my God, man. That no one has done that to Nonito except maybe Walters a little bit later on, but Nonito Donaire, cast iron chin. And these guys are anomalies. So don't look at Donaire being in his 40s. Guys like Manny Pacquiao, Golovkin, Donaire, these are anomalies that come once in a generation, that are able to defy age, reinvent themselves and still be destructive forces by virtue of having great chins and having one punch knockout power. And Nonito Donaire, has demonstrated that time and time again. But some of Inoue's short punches, the way he came underneath, Donaire was trying to back him up on the ropes, pivoted, ducked, got out of it, turned the body, and Nonito didn't even see him, hit him with that cattle prod of a short, straight counter right hand. Donaire didn't even recover from that punch. It was just it just goes to show, he doesn't even have to load up on his punches. Just the power is at any ranges, whether he opens up with long right hands, which he did against Maloney with significant distance in between the fighters, or whether it's short, whether it's on the inside, whether it's against Rodriguez with his left hand, breaking his nose. Man, he's just a destructive machine. You're better off vacating the titles and moving up away, staying away from the monster smoke, because
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, yeah. So I give credit to Paul Butler, because my God, he's gonna get a beating in that fight.
But you know what? That amazing right hand that he landed against Donaire in the rematch. Yeah, I was as amazed as you are how short it was, how how short of a target it was in between the target and his glove, and the way he landed it, the way he twisted his body into it. Fantastic mechanics, body mechanics. But see, that's the reason, that very fight, the rematch with Donaire, is the reason why I don't think anymore that Casimero would be able to test him. I used to believe that for quite a long time, being that Casimero himself, he's explosive, he's unorthodox, and is wild, can catch you by surprise. But when I saw his recent performances, like against Rigondao, despite Rigondao being a back foot bitch, fighting like a back foot bitch, I do think that it showed how Casimero telegraphs his punches, especially in that fight. And I was thinking if he does the same against Inoue, especially with how sharp his timing was against Donaire in the rematch, he will be no test for him.
Yeah, and we know our good friend Diego will be defiant, probably listening to this stream,
Yeah,
cursing
shout out to
cursing you,
him.
cursing you and cursing me, and saying, nah, 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 Casemiro didn't duck. Didn't he wanted that smoke? Inoue was the one who ducked the fight.
But by the way, I cannot remember now. But I had some conversations on Discord with them, with
Okay.
Diego Bandido and Sina Musia. Shout out to both of them, like a year ago, and I was asking them to explain me the situation. Now, unfortunately, I do not remember the details, but they made to me what seemed like a very serious case for Casimiro not ducking Inoue at all. Unfortunately, I cannot remember what were the things that they told me, but I will have to check with them.
Yeah, because just before the lockdown, he because I don't think Casimiro is a road warrior as well. We got to remember that this guy has fought in 9 different countries as well, and you got to give credit to him for that. You know, the way he came over and he destroyed, Zelani Tete, who we saw recently still has punching power, and is not a bad fighter. People are a little bit too overcritical of Zelani, but he's a puncher. He's got power, man. But the way Casimiro disposed of him, that was magnificent. So he's a threat, and it would have been a good fight. But I think with Casimiro is that he doesn't have that natural fan base. Certainly for a fight in the States, or a fight. I don't know about the Philippines. So I think he was looking. They were calling that anyway, but they were looking for the money definitely to come from Japan. But when the lockdowns happened, I think Casemiro realized that it wasn't going to happen. He wasn't going to get whatever he was looking for in the fight. I think he was looking for a 50-50 split, because I clearly remember one time he was saying that he deserved a 50-50 split in the fight, but not in Japan. You're never going to get that. In a way, he's going to get the lion's share, and justifiably so, because it's going to be all of his fan base, and it's going to be on domestic TV, and so in a way, he's going to be it's probably going to be like a 70-30, I imagine, in Japan. But Casemiro still would have got decent money. I remember when Mutalani, when he fought Yagashi in Japan, Mutalani was coming over with the title, and they still paid Mutalani over $1 million for the fight, and you got to respect that. So even for a veteran with Yagashi, you know, they'll still pay whether you're a contender, whether you have a sizable fan base or not. It doesn't matter, man. If they're confident they're going to get the championship from you, if they feel you're vulnerable, or if it's a fighter that you're desperate to bring over, whether you have respect for them or not, or Mitsulani, you can imagine this never made anywhere near the sort of money he did in that fight. So fighters, you know, I mean, you get paid a handsome ransom in Japan, so it doesn't matter whether it's lockdown or not. I think Casimiro would have got probably his biggest payday over there. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to speak to Diego and Sin and find out, you know, what exactly transpired. But I can't imagine. I can't imagine, you know, the monster, you know, ducking that fight. I think he was coming out and criticizing the sort of style that Casimiro was having, saying that, you know, your wide arching hooks not going to be a problem for me. And I think Inoue is right. You know, Casimiro is just a little bit too aggressive, but still, you never know with those sort of, you know, wild fighters. You know, you don't know what's going to land, what's not. You know, I think it still would have been. I think the build up to the fight, I think, would have been fireworks as well. You know,
Oh
Casimiro,
yeah, definitely.
yeah, yeah, Casimiro would have been just you know the sort of comedic element he brings into the fights. Uh, it would have been a battle of hairstyles as well. I think anyway,
Yeah. Good one, good one.
you know, anyway would have come in with some crazy purple hair, and Casemiro would have come in with some probably with some. He would have come in probably with the WBC belt, you know, on his hair, you know, dyed into his hair. He would have. So
Or
visually,
leopard print.
yeah, it would have just been. I think it would have just been money, you know, a paper a pay-per-view fight, but it's maybe the boat has sailed on that one. I think, you know, I'm not sure what Inoue's going to do after Paul Butler. Whether he's still there's nothing more for him to do. He's cleaned out the division. Um, I don't know. We'll see. We don't know whether his contract with Top Rank still extends or whether he will stay in Japan. Boxing is just becoming very difficult to predict with so many you know variables, unfortunately, and so many so many tactics to delay fights and you know deny the boxing public you know great fights in their prime, unfortunately. But it doesn't matter, you know. No, in a way, could be one, could be two, coin toss, you know, just a devastating fighter. I think with so much upside as well. I think he has the ability, maybe not to go up too many weights, but he can go to super bantamweight. He could probably even go to flyweight. Sorry, to featherweight as well. But you got to remember, you know, he's only around 5 feet 5 inches, so he doesn't have a particularly long arm reach. So there are ceilings, unfortunately, for these fighters. But um, yeah, we'll see what happens. But anything more official? Should we go to number one? Unless you've
No,
got any.
no. Enough said of Inoue. Let's go to the number one.
Number one, Kudatara Boxing. Number one for our updated list, September 2022. No surprise. The personification of a road warrior. The guy is probably doing the greater number of pound for pound attributes in cross-referencing it with our criteria at the very start. A fighter who's gone back to back with Anthony Joshua, giving up 13 kilos in weight, 3-4 inches in height, reach, strength, punching power, but also giving up A-side privileges, beating Joshua in London in decisive fashion, and in the fight in Saudi Arabia, having traveled from the Ukraine where he had to stay by virtue of the family policy. So Usyk had to compensate for, you know, he had lost about, you know, good maybe I don't know, maybe around 9-10 kilos in weight. So he had to make that up as well and come up with, a training camp as well. So very difficult. I mean, he's had hell in the last since April. But in Saudi Arabia, we saw an Usyk who had to contend with a resurgent Joshua, a revitalized Joshua with a new trainer, an aggressive Joshua. And Usyk had to fight differently in that fight. He had to absorb some great adversity in that fight, especially with the bodywork that Joshua was laying down. But what people don't realize is that Usyk's ability in that fight, certainly with maybe not with jabs, but with straight right hands. My God, did he parry and block and slip a lot of punches? But some of Usyk's counter punching that he put in that fight, he set some traps on Joshua, which I didn't see in the first fight. Joshua just walking onto some beautiful straight left hand counters to penetrate Joshua's guard, but some of his right hooks and body work in that fight as well. I think there was too much emphasis on what Joshua was doing on that fight, but they weren't seeing what Usyk was doing in the fight to pretty much win. I'd say around maybe 7 rounds to 5, 8 rounds to 4. I don't think there's no doubt Alexander Usyk was the better fighter. But his chin as well. Joshua put in some haymaker right hands around the sort of 7th, 8th, 9th round, and what Usyk took in the fights. And I mean, you were mentioning to me some of the punches physically moving Usyk, but he didn't get back on his back foot, nor did he clinch excessively in the fight. Now, he did have to clinch 1 or 2 times for some vicious body shots, but Joshua was you got to say, was very dirty in the fight as well. Low blows, some of the vicious punches on the break he was landing to the back of Usyk's head. A 265-pound fighter in the fight, inflicting deliberate punches in frustration to the back of Usyk's head. Punches which can cause brain damage, it can cause blindness. That's why punches are that Louis Pavon did warn Joshua. So they were trying to enforce the rules, but Joshua was very dirty in that fight. But Usyk doing what we were saying before, there's no fighter giving away that much, having that big of a disadvantage in the ring. And one of the judges, Glenn Philman, in still trying to give the fight to Joshua. There's no way Joshua won that fight 115, 113. I think, a 116, 112, maybe even a 115, 113 for Usyk, I think were fair cards. But I think Usyk weren't maybe the preparation was difficult for him, but I think even Usyk at an 80% official is still able to take on these bigger guys and still rely on his superior boxing ability and his counter punching and his granite chin, and still get forward and still come away with victories. Just a remarkable sort of once in a generation type of talent.
Oh yeah, he has it all. He has the chin, ring IQ, footwork, have I said footwork, chin, work rate, but he has balls, man, balls. Going to the other fighters' backyard to fight them, and never getting into any of the diva shit, unlike the other fighters. So he has everything that you have to respect in a fighter. This new weight class, he's fighting people who are 10, 20 kilograms or 20, 40 pounds heavier than him. Joshua was like 20 some plus heavier. The way he disposed of, I mean, it was a competitive fight. Joshua got him in trouble, but Usyk did some pound for pound shit. And yeah, I would not get into this last fight. I would not go so deep into it, being that they covered it on the previous stream that they did just after the fight. I said everything about the fight that I had to say, but in overall, look, Usyk's resume. If we as the coup d'etat boxing are taking into consideration, let's say, about 3 last years of fighters' careers and base their pound for pound rankings on that, he has two great victories against the man who had 3 belts in that division, was a huge and still is a huge superstar, probably the best paid boxer in the game right now, even more than Canelo, who himself is a very underrated boxer and had a very nice resume. In fact, if you take Usyk out, he had the best resume in the heavyweight division by far. And at least I cannot remember any other current active boxer except Usyk that had such a good resume as AJ had. And I don't want to blow it out of proportions as AJ. He fought some of those fighters when they were really old, out of their prime, but however impressive and what he was showing in the ring against Usyk. Given that Joshua has some limitations, uh, he doesn't have. It's clear that he does not have the same level of talent of Usyk. No one has, almost no one has. So I don't want to judge him for that. But even despite that gap in their skills, he was doing some really good and smart things in both of the fights, and I really liked his effort in both of the fights, except for the dirty things that he's doing in the ring. That's appalling, but it was to be expected. Even Usyk expected it, to the point where even in the first fight, when Joshua would cuff him behind the back of his head with a left hook to pull him down into his right uppercut. He had an answer for it. Usyk would still try to, while being held behind the back, behind the head, he would move to the right, circle around Joshua while protecting the left side of his face. He did the same thing in the rematch. I mean, yeah, but back to Usyk, fantastic. And not only those 2 fights against Joshua, 3 belts holder, a much bigger man than him. I mean, physically bigger. But that fight against Chisora as well, that was what, 50 pounds heavier guy than him. That was bum rushing him. And Usyk, like we said in that on that show after the fight against Chisora, he clearly didn't want to show everything that he had because Joshua and Eddie Hearn were watching. Also, of course, Chisora himself, he did give him some trouble because Usyk was recent to that weight class. But so we are talking about a guy who also wanted to fight Alexander Povetkin for his heavyweight debut, but it was Povetkin who didn't want to fight Usyk, and I believe there were some other guys as well, but I cannot remember. Or look, Usyk, I would say, when you compare him to, let's say, Chocolatito Gonzalez or Vasily Lomachenko, I would say that both of them on pure skills are better than Usyk, but who still has great pound for pound skill set. But the achievements and fighting bigger guys than him is impressive. And also, I'm saying it on almost every stream that I'm on, but if Lomachenko is being that they're kind of not same, but very similar fighters in many ways. If Lomachenko is more potent, more better skillful fighter coming forward, Usyk is a fighter who looks the best that I ever seen looking on the back foot. Even especially his cruiserweight fights. Look, I'm someone who always prefer and like pressure fighters. Those are my favorite types of fighters. I don't like boxing, like what Usyk was doing or what Ali was doing back in the day. But even me myself, being such a boxing fan who prefers the pressure fighters, inside fighting, etc. It was so beautiful to me to see the way Usyk was, for example, boxing in Poland when he won his first belt in cruiserweight division against Kowalski. That fighting on the back foot, so smooth, like no one else. I don't know what else to say, but high praise to Usyk. I'm pretty much sure I'm forgetting to mention a lot of important things, but
We've
yeah,
said it. Yeah, we've said it. I mean, we've probably exhausted on superlatives to actually put on Usyk, but it shows. I mean, I saw him 2012 live. I saw him straight away, and I said, this guy is potentially the best fighter I've seen. So I was super confident, and I made predictions almost 6, 7 years ago that he would be cruiserweight and heavyweight undisputed champions. And Mike over at Pound for Pound Boxing Report has that on video as well. So there's so I think I've been almost the Nostradamus on that one. But with Usyk, and you were talking about the back foot ability and what's better, front foot, back foot. In this fight with Joshua, although he was very much center ring, but Joshua was more aggressive in this fight in trying to walk Usyk down, cut off the ring and try and trap him up against the ropes corner where he could actually inflict, very heavy punches to both head and body combinations this time. But what Usyk was doing on the back foot, knowing that he couldn't get that lead hand control, especially when Joshua was walking him down, Usyk would just double jab, but the jabs wouldn't land. Joshua would be various. It would hit his guard, double jab. Then Joshua would try and go for that loading left hand to the body, which was landing at times. But Usyk would then make the adjustment, knowing Joshua would open up, but he would shift his body slightly to get on the outside of Usyk's lead foot so he could actually land that. But Usyk would then come the other way and then come with that counter right hand. And that kept landing and landing. It was just a beautiful trap he set. And then Joshua realized that not to open up his body to try and come in front of him, try and stand, because when he would get on the outside to trap Usyk as well, Usyk would then come back with that straight left-hand counter to penetrate the guard of Joshua. And just beautiful adjustments and counter punching in that fight. And that's what no boxing channel, not even the BDA, the panels were even mentioning. It was all Joshua was doing this and that. Nothing technical on what Usyk was doing in the fight, but there was a lot of nuances that Usyk had to do by virtue of what he was facing in some of the dangers and some of the real estate, what Joshua was eating down and sort of capturing him. And it just shows you got to think on your feet on the fly, and fighters like that have it, and they can just pull it out in even when it looks like they're in desperate situations.
Yeah, great point. So with all his physical talent when it comes to his footwork and his speed, quickness, accuracy, people forget how cerebral Alexander Usyk is, and you just perfectly explained it. And it's and he's able to basically freestyle and uh, get get out of trouble by quickly analyzing what's happening. A really good, a really seriously good boxing brain of Alexander Usyk. Yeah, and so I even mentioned on the previous stream that I did alone after the fight in between him and Joshua that at one time when Joshua was all out, throwing punches and bunches at him, pressuring him, throwing body punches, low blows. He stopped doing it when Usyk started countering his right uppercuts and right hooks to the body with the straight southpaw left to the head, and he landed it a couple of times in a row in just a few in 10 seconds, and I was able to see what's his name, Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua back out. Yeah. Uh, by the way, I'm not sure if corruption dropped out. Is he coming back or not? But yeah, I can say while waiting to see if he'll jump on. Although it's been 3 hours and 20 minutes since we started the stream. Let me see if there are some other names, honorable mentions. Yeah, like I said, Subriel Matias, in terms of pure skills, he's not an amazing talent or anything like that. He's good. He holds his own. Very good on the inside. It's his physicality that is pound for pound, and his punching power that is pound for pound as well. Debilitating power, as corruption would say. And you can make a great case that there are other fighters who would deserve to fund themselves on a pound for pound list. But the thing is, there were many pretenders, many potential names for us to name on today's show in our top 10. But the thing is, with the way boxing sanctioning bodies were fucking with Subriel Matias and a string of victories that he has, very quality victories. I was looking forward to including him on number 10, which was supposed to be shared with Jesse Bam Rodriguez's brother, Joshua Franco, who's another amazing corruption is back. Let me add him to the stream. Yeah, corruption.
Yeah, the firewall was breached. My connection severed and my credit cards attacked. They don't want me paying for the Luis Ortiz pay-per-view, so damn.
Oh, Ortiz pay-per-view.
So honorable mentions you're on, yeah?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So there was, there's a tremendous amount. I think he was talking about Matthias. Matthias, we had
Joshua Franco.
Yeah, now the thing with Are you still? Because I lost connection, I'm not sure. Have you gone through Matthias?
Well, I was not going into details. I
Fine.
just spent 2 minutes of briefly talking about him, but that's all. You say whatever you want about him, but I was not getting into details anyways.
No, I agree. I mean, with you, with Subriel, it may not be a world level skill set, but with him, it's somebody who we can see is getting better. Now, he might have had an upset loss against Petros Ananias. A difficult time. I mean, when you're fighting Russians back to back and you've inflicted, unfortunately, a sad death on one Russian, then you fight another Russian, I don't think it was a wise strategy from his promoter to put him in the ring with yet another Russian straight after. We don't know his mental state, and we know with Matthias, he's a man of faith. I think he had some troubles early on in his career, but he's acknowledged those. So he's trying to turn his life around. So he's not a destructive killer. That's not what he sets out to be in the ring. And he talks about that. He's not even a vicious puncher. He says he's more of an attritional puncher. And you can see that to a certain extent as well. So he's quite realistic about his abilities and his skill set as well. But we see now with different trainers, and we're seeing now with a new look. He's left the Demolition Man look, and he's trying to come up with more of a mature look. In his mother and his family actually visiting the United States and seeing his fight. So it was a good against in the rematch against Ananias official. I see a different levels to his skill set, counter punching as well.
Yeah,
So I
me
mean,
too as well.
yeah. So our point being, maybe he's not a pound for pound level fighter just yet, but the potential and the ability is there. But why the fuck is he not getting a world title shot? That disillusions me because he won a final eliminator 3 years ago for an IBF. So the belts are being fractured off. So why isn't Matthias? Why is Batir Akhmedov and Oscar Garcia and all those sort of fighters are getting title shots? Why isn't Matthias? So politics again, I think.
Yeah, most definitely.
But yeah, he's not too far off, and yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with him. But yeah, definitely a future because we've got a lot of veterans in our list, so definitely a natural progression for him coming in later on if he can get a fight with even a Ramirez or even a Josh Taylor or even a Regis Prograis, any of these fighters, Shakram Girsov, so there's a lot of it's a stacked division, so we'll wait and see. I mean, another fighter me and official were potentially contemplating putting in was the now WBA champion Joshua Franco at 115 pounds, and that's an interesting one as well because you can't blame him for being upgraded to full championship status, having won the regular championship from Andrew Maloney. Um, but I think what was the ultimate deciding factor against it for me was the fact that Franco started off his career at bantamweight at 118 pounds, so he's actually come down in weight to 115. So he is a bigger fighter, but he was only 22 when he started off. Now he won. Well, he had 3 wars with Negrete. Now they were fighting for the NABF championship. Now the first fight was a split decision draw, and I felt it was a 10-rounder, a brilliant fight, and I would urge people to watch it. These guys threw out like over 1,000 punches respectively, and I think with Franco, initially he was a volume puncher, so he never really had, the full level of skills. And before he fought Negrete, he was stopped in the 9th round. I mean, at bantamweight as well. So he never had the skill set, the professor, in which they call him, and that is his moniker. They call him the professor because I think he walked into the Robert Garcia gym dressed almost like a professor, dressed in sharp attire, with V-neck and dress shirts with glasses. So I think they called him the professor for that. But he doesn't really exemplify the professor when he comes in the ring. But I think it's taken him a little fine. I think it's taken Garcia a bit of time to actually develop him from being a one-dimensional volume puncher on the inside. But even then, what he had to contend with against Negrete, the Colombian was throwing low blows, wound, Negrete was trained by, Manny Robles, so he had a good trainer, and Garcia was training, so it was a high-level skill fight. Bernard Hopkins there was an Golden Boy ESPN fight, Bernard Hopkins was commentating on the first fight and Doug Fisher on their second fight against Negrete. And in the first fight, Negrete was landing headbutts, vicious headbutts, low blows. But Franco may have lost the first two or I'd say he lost the first 3 rounds, but he came back and he won the last 7 rounds, even though they were competitive rounds. Nobody was floored, anything like that, or stunned significantly. But Franco got better and better throughout the fight, and I felt, he won the last 7 rounds, so it should have been like a 97-93 type of, decision. I think was a fair, but it was a split decision draw. Negrete was the champion, so maybe they got the benefit of the doubt in that fight. But in the second fight, Negrete was the one who made the adjustments, and he actually increased his volume, probably landing. But in the first fight, it's interesting. CompuBox, and I don't know how these CompuBox guys even did the statistics, but they felt it was only 1 punch differential between the fighters. I think it was something like 352, 351 in favor of I think Franco. So a one very hard official for that fight. You had to have watched it at half speed, because these guys to throw over 100 punches around, and Franco was actually, despite being at the end of more of the low blows and the headbutts, which I think damaged his eye, he put a beating on Negrete and actually busted up his face. And Negrete was, shipping the punishment at the end of the fights, and he was slowing down. And Franco was able to, finally open up and land multiple punches combos when Negrete was actually feeling the punches. But the errors Franco made in the second round, he didn't go to the body as he was in the first round to try and slow Negrete. So I think Negrete was able to throw a lot more punches, and I think a lot of people felt that Negrete won the second fight, but they gave that fight to Franco. So he may have been fortunate. I'm not going to argue too much with that as well. But Franco came around in the third round. So I think what Garcia has tried to do with Franco is that you're a much better boxer. You're not using your jab. You're not maintaining distance and range. And I think when he came down to super flyweight, we've seen that we've seen a much better boxer. And I don't think it's the case that Franco is using his attritional size to get the victory. I think, on the contrary, he's using better boxing. I think he's a more patient fighter. I think he's using timing. I think he's realizing that he can use heavier punches to punch in between fighters who are throwing multiple punch combinations. So I think he's a much better strategic fighter, and I think he works the body, and I think he's before he was always looking for his left hand to the body, but I think his right hand now as a power punch is much better. So with Joshua Franco, it's a case that he definitely wasn't the finished article at bantamweight, and he looks a better fighter at super flyweight. And I think he's becoming a better fighter with the level of sparring he's getting up, because his brother has gone from, he was only 19 back then when he was fighting at bantamweight. So I think he's getting great sparring. You can imagine with certainly with the southpaw in his brother, and with the Garcia gym, they've got a whole bunch of Lithuanians, Russians, as well as Mexicans and Americans. So they've got a conveyor belt of fighters who are sharpening his craft, and Franco has been talking about that. And I think he's a better fighter. I think he's getting better and better. So I think it was maybe a touch, maybe a little bit too early from my perspective, that they should have put him within the top 10. But he was willing to, he wanted the fight with Estrada. You can't blame him the fact that Estrada chose not to fight and vacate the belt, because I think Estrada is looking for a bigger payday with Gonzalez in the third fight. All right. It is prize fighting at the end of the day. That's Estrada's reasons. And they were exciting fights. And I don't think us as boxing fans are too angry about that, because we want to see Roman Gonzalez. We want to see Roman Gonzalez come up for that.
Oh, you just jumped out? Or I cannot hear you at all. There's no sound. Oh, you muted yourself. Yeah, what I believe corruption tried to say. To be honest, we are waiting for Chocolatito to get that well-deserved victory. Go on.
No, it was just the family advising me that they're cooking and dinner's almost ready, and I'm getting extremely hungry. So yeah. Sorry about that. But what I was saying is that I don't think we're too angry, because we want to see Roman finally get his revenge and get some justice potentially in the third fight, and and beat Estrada. So that would be good. So maybe the time is not right for Franco just yet, but he's he's in his mid to late 20s, so he's getting his man strength as well. He's getting better, so potentially in the future, I think he can certainly unify as well, whether it's an Ioka or an Estrada or whoever is in the division. The guy who beat Jervin and Kanyas, I think the Argentinian pressure fighter as well. Oh, him and Franco would be my God, stylistically, that would be a war. So.
Oh yeah, that guy.
So great fights, just to conclude, great fights out there. So one to watch out for definitely in Franco. We rate him very highly, and I think he could potentially surprise a hell of a lot. It's almost ironic, the way people are now jumping onto Bam Rodriguez. A couple of years ago, me and Official were like that, so they're almost like 2-3 years behind. But we were like that with Joshua Franco, saying that this guy, don't underestimate him. Don't sleep on him. He's a good fighter, good ability. Maybe in 2, 3 years, people will catch up on Franco.
Yeah, that's exact. Yeah, well said. Okay, but so look, we've been on for 3 hours, nearly 40 minutes. I think it's the right time to end it. Although we had many more names to speak about, to give a word or two about, but no, this is already an extremely long show.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you earned a well-deserved dinner. Me, I have to walk my dog. So I would like to thank everyone who joined who joined us, listening to us on YouTube during the live or afterwards. And Thank you too for for this amazing conversation. I loved it.
Yeah, it's been a little while, man, but yeah, it's been fantastic. Um, Reacquainting, joining forces with the CEO. It's been especially for a conversation like this, because we've had a lot of preparation and great conversations in trying to get down to a final 10. You know, a lot of clash of ideology, a clash of intelligence, but you know, good conciliation. You know, getting down to, I think, a very good list. A little bit of compromise on both sides, and that's what it comes down to as well when you're doing, a joint list. But it's been fantastic. I think it's a great list. You know, very refreshing, great list of youth and old, some cerebral talents, some talents which are just burgeoning, getting better and better, with a degree of upside that can scale as well. So, and fighters who are fully ready right now, who can just move up multiple weight categories and become multiple weight champions. So, yeah, fantastic list, and yeah, want to thank Official Scorecard as well for a lot of the work he's done behind the scenes in preparing it, film studies, look at the artwork he's done, and the rotating art as well. He's like a this guy. He's like a modern day artist sculpture, man, with some of his artworks as well, man. Fantastic. Yeah, he's like a John Leguizzi or whatever. Some of these great new modern day nuanced contemporary artists, man. He's doing some great artwork as well, man. So a lot of respect to Official.
Thank you, bro.
But yeah, on the final note for me, yeah, I want to thank everybody who had the patience. Some of them unfortunately didn't stay to the end, but I don't blame them. Sunday, kind of a weird time, but thank you to all the loyal foot soldiers who joined in for all of their comments. Unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity given by nature of a show that we had, in which we had a set criteria we wanted to go to, and we didn't want it to be extraordinary in terms of a 6-7 hour show like last time. But thank you to all those, and hopefully a lot of the people will come back and listen to it at a later date on all of our various platforms as well. I think there's some great content there to digest.
Okay, so once again, thank you all for tuning in, and peace out. See you soon, guys. Thank you.
Sayonara.